Okay, so we'll go ahead and press record and begin. So welcome everyone to our inaugural Student Research Symposium. I'm Dr. Monique Elakasi. I am the Director for First Year Writing Program here in the Department of English at Howard University. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024, 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome everyone to Exploring Race, Identity, and Historical Trauma through Octavia Butler's Kindred. We are so excited to have each and every one of you here with us during this inaugural movement that is indeed student-centered, student-focused. So we are really excited to hear from a lot of groundbreaking research and creative expressions as well, as we have been exploring in all of our first year writing program courses from English 102 to 103 to 104 to 105, and our technical writing 009 and 010. So we are indeed excited to have all of you. If you have your program booklet, there is a link, and we were making updates all the way up until the last minute, and those updates are live. So if anyone has the link and someone did not receive the link, please kindly go ahead and put it in the comment section of Zoom, so everyone that did not have access to the digital link will now have access to it. So we're going to go ahead and start up. And if you have your program booklet with you, you can go ahead and follow along with us. We'll go over the logistics and how everything will be set up and ran very smoothly today for us. Okay, so what we're going to do now, okay, we have a few more people entering. Okay. Okay, so this semester has been incredible. All students have been reading the common, amazing common text, Octavia Butler's Kindred, and all of the students have been engaged with lecture series, excuse me, including, excuse me, Dr. Kindred Parker and Dr. Black, two award-winning scholars and writers who have also explored Octavia Butler. And so students were really awesome and happy and excited as well regarding hearing from some of the renowned scholars in the field with Octavia Butler. And we're also excited to continue that tradition today, because now, after hearing from these renowned scholars, reading Octavia Butler's Kindred, now we are going to hear from the students and their reactions and their responses to Kindred, and how this has had a major impact on them as well. This is the first time that this has been done in our Department of English through First Year Writing Program. So indeed, this is very creative and very innovative and groundbreaking. And we're also excited to have with us today our very own Dr. Iowa, who will serve as our keynote speaker. So it is indeed with great pleasure to welcome all of you to our inaugural symposium today. We'd like to thank all of you for joining us, whether you are our esteemed faculty members, our student presenters, our great student scholars in the audience that's showing support, our esteemed administrators, from our department chair to our dean, to our provost, to our president, and to our guests and beyond. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Your presence here is a testament to the importance of fostering intellectual engagement and celebrating student scholarship here at Howard University in our first year writing program in the Department of English. This symposium marks a significant milestone for the first-year writing program at Howard. Our mission is to cultivate critical thinkers, confident writers, researchers, and engaged citizens who use their voices to contribute meaningfully to the academic and global communities. Today's event indeed embodies that mission by providing a platform for our students to showcase their research, share their ideas, and engage in thoughtful dialogue. The theme of this year's symposium is inspired by our common read, Octavia Butler's Kindred, a groundbreaking work of literature that examines themes of race, identity, and historical trauma, very timely here in our 21st century, 2024. Through their research and writing, our students have explored how Butler's narrative continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about social justice, equity, and representation. Their work indeed challenges us to think critically, reimagine history, and consider new possibilities for the future. Our purpose is twofold: to inspire growth and to build community. To our student presenters, we are incredibly proud of your dedication, creativity, and hard work. Today is a celebration of your voices and your courage to share with the world what you have discovered. Let this experience be a stepping stone in your journey as scholars and change makers. To our faculty and guests, thank you for supporting our students and helping us create a space where their voices are not only heard, but celebrated. Your encouragement and guidance are invaluable in shaping the next generation of leaders and thinkers. And as we embark on this event, I encourage everyone to listen with open minds, ask thoughtful questions, and embrace the spirit of collaboration that defines our community. Once again, welcome to the symposium, and thank you for being part of this exciting and transformative event. Let's make it a day to remember. Thank you. And now we are going to hear from our esteemed department chair, Dr. Carol Boyce Davies, renowned scholar and our chair. We're so excited to have her. I'm actually going to share on her behalf a message that she had published on page 4 in the booklet. And she writes, and that's because she is out today, but she is with us here in spirit. She says, intellectual joy. According to legendary writer Audre Lorde, we should get as much joy in creativity and intellectual pursuits as we get in any other activity. This is one of these opportunities to share your ideas as thinkers as you move through your academic career. The first Students Research Symposium, organized by the First Year Writing Program and our department under the experienced leadership of Dr. Akasi, provides you with one of these opportunities that will resound in your future endeavors. The first Black woman Supreme Court, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, in her new autobiography, Lovely One, a memoir, 2024, describes the experiences of presenting her work in public in debates and symposia, while she was a student who took advantage of and excelled in an intellectual context, as providing her with the experience she needed to go forward, culminating in the heights she has achieved. Do use this as a similar formative experience as you move to similar career excellence. Warm regards, Dr. Carol Boyce Davies, Professor of African Diaspora Literatures, Chair, Department of English, moving to Literature and Writing in 2025. Thank you so much to our dynamic department chair for those encouraging and prophetic words for all of us today. Now I would like to turn it over to, okay, going right along in our program. Okay, I'd like to turn it now over to, I'm on page 5, Professor Rebecca Boylan, Master English Instructor.
Can't get my video working, but greetings to everybody. And
we just saw you,
oh, you
Professor
did?
Boylan.
Okay, then
Yeah.
maybe let me try it one more time.
Okay.
There we
There you
go.
go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about the glitch. I just want to thank Howard University's writing program for the selection of Octavia E. Butler's Kindred, supported by the soulful and scholarly insights of Dr. Daniel Black and Dr. Kendra Parker. I also wish to acknowledge with sincere appreciation Dr. Monique Akasi's indomitable spirit in organizing and leading all of us through a rich variety of ways to encounter Butler's text. I know that many of us became more enlightened close readers through the weekly community of readers, thinkers, and writers orchestrated by Professor Cyrus Hampton. I am joined by all faculty today, especially in conveying to our wonderfully curious and imaginative student presenters and writers how very proud we all are to work beside you. Your writing is honored today for guiding us in reimagining history through the empowering lenses of Black speculative fiction, Afrofuturism, womanism, spirituality, and the traumas of joy and joys of identity. Brava and bravo to all students on this call for your writing that courageously questions and energetically explores. The students in my 102 sections who are presenting today responded to the question, why not, as a means to explore Butler's novel as Black speculative fiction. In their podcast scripts, they support their arguments with ideas from scholars Dr. Daniel Black on Kindred and Dr. Marcus Haynes on Black speculative fiction. And then, as part of their own genuine connection with the novel, they further close read a piece of Black speculative music that responds to their why not question, further illuminating their own interpretation of Butler. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Boylan. We greatly appreciate you and all that you have done to make this possible as well with your esteemed students. Now we will hear from Professor Thomas uh, Ono Machado.
Hey,
Greetings.
everybody. Hey, thank you so much to Dr. Akazi for organizing everything and for making this space available for our students to express everything they've studied, researched, and wrote on. Whether it's the ways in which the impacts of slavery have extended its damage to stereotypes and other forms of oppression, as Avery has talked about, into the succeeding centuries, the complexities of intergenerational trauma and connections, the power of persuasion and coercion, themes of survival, and ways in which understanding of identity itself shifts and changes over different time periods, as Savannah has talked about. I'm really proud of the work that my students have done. It was really their hard work, and I just put sort of an open-ended question out there for them to respond whatever stood out to them. And they made really eloquent work, and I'm excited for all of you to see it today. And again, thank you to the department. Thank you to Dr. Akazi and Dr. Boyce Davies for extending this opportunity to our really profound young thinkers, writers, and scholars.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for representing all of us as well at NCTE. That is awesome. And thank you for your flexibility today as well, Professor Machado. And as I had said previously as well, we thank you. This would not have been possible without your esteemed students. Here in our first year writing program, we want for students to experience experiential learning. And this is definitely experiential learning. We see through innovative works like this, the symposium, the conference, students who are presenting papers being published in peer review referee journals. This is what we do. This is what graduate school is looking for. This is indeed the mark of cultivating our students as the Trailblazer Scholars. It is indeed bigger than the grade. Today's students are not getting a grade. This is not a final exam. This is because they have put their all into their works, and they're starting to see that their words, their voice, their intellectual perspectives, and the beauty of the diversity and the inclusiveness of the diverse perspectives all matter. And that's what we are here to celebrate today. So indeed, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have a few, I see we have more esteemed faculty member in the audience as well. We have a few minutes before we start our first panel. Would anyone from our esteemed audience, faculty and administrators, would anybody else like to say a few words? I know our administrative assistant, Ms. Douglas, is here, and we definitely have to give a round of applause to Ms. Douglas because she holds down the fort in our department, which is one of the largest. And we can't thank you enough, Ms. Douglas, for all that you do. I don't know how you do it, but you do it with grace and expertise, and we thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this symposium.
Awesome. Our pleasure. And then we have a few other esteemed faculty in the audience as well. I see Professor Travis Sharp. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. If you have any words at any point, just feel free to unmute, hop on, but we thank you for supporting. We greatly appreciate you and all that you do to make this possible as well. All right. Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Akasi. Everyone who has put great labor into getting this symposium together. I'm very excited to hear student perspectives, as of course, have been hearing student perspectives on Kindred all semester as we've been reading it in my first year writing classes, but love this opportunity to dive in more deeply and to hear thoughts from others in other sections and to really pool our knowledge in this really generous and collaborative way. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Sharp, for all that you do. Excellent. Are there any others in the audience? With the share screen, it's kind of difficult to see everyone. Anyone else, just feel free to unmute. Anyone else, feel free to unmute. Any students that are not presenting today, if you have a word or two that you like to say, feel free to unmute. All right. Okay. Well, without further ado, then we're going to go ahead on the...
Thank you.
So if you look at the program on page 5, it's just a quick snapshot. So the way the itinerary will go today, we will have from 12:30 till 1:30 presentations, and then we will have the keynote address by Dr. Jaquetta.
I said, who is it?
Iowa, and that will take place at 1:30. And then after that,
She wearing it? Yeah, I don't know if I have.
Oh, are you wearing it?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind then.
Other
I did not know.
okay, I just muted. Okay. So then we'll have the keynote address from 1:30 to 2:30. And then after that, we will continue with presentations from 2:30 to 3:30. And then around 3:45, we'll have closing remarks, awards, and the announcements of those who will be published next week in our peer review referee journal from these presentations, as well as some that did not make the presentations, but they still had stellar papers. So I'll be reaching back out to those professors to have their papers edited and also included in the publication. So we're very, very pleased to share that publication with you next week. And I know we will be away for fall break, pardon me, Thanksgiving break next week as well. But we'll go ahead and make sure that that's available as soon as we return. All right, so we'll go ahead and continue. So now we're going to start up and begin with our first panel. And as you can see, we had various breakout rooms. What I'd like for us to do is to go ahead and just stay in one room for now collectively. And then as the afternoon goes on, if it gets a little heavy, then we'll go ahead and move towards the breakout rooms. But for now, I will go ahead and stay in one room if everyone's okay with that, and go ahead and get ready to begin. All right, so we have about 3 minutes before it starts. So feel free to take a minute, stretch, stand up, whatever you have to do. Take 3 minutes, and then we will start with our first panel, which is looking back as we move forward in Octavia Butler's Kindred. And we will have presenting, Sydney Smith will be presenting on post-traumatic slave syndrome and its effects in Octavia Butler's Kindred. Thank you, Sydney, for being able to present. Sydney's one of my students from 102, and we're grateful to have you to kickstart it, followed by Taylor Williams and investigating the why nots of Octavia Butler, and then Mariah Sims, Sunday Speculation and Octavia Butler's Kindred, and Jalen Smith, Honor the Past, Move Toward the Future, and Kindred. Okay, so we have like 2 minutes. We'll go ahead and take a break, and then we'll reconvene at 12:30 sharp. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the first panel. We are so glad to have everyone with us today. We have our first panel, as I mentioned, looking back as we move forward in Octavia Butler's Kindred. We will begin with Sydney Smith, followed by Taylor Williams, followed by Mariah Sims, and then Jalen Smith. Each presenter will have between 10 to 15 minutes to present. And then at the end of this panel, once everyone has presented, we'll open up the floor to the audience for questions, comments, reflections for the panel as a whole and or for individual presenters. Without further ado, let's go ahead and give a virtual round of applause for our first presenter, Sydney Smith, presenting post-traumatic slave syndrome and its effects in Octavia Butler's Kindred.
Hello,
Okay.
good afternoon. Okay. Do I need to share the essay or just read it?
Yes, we all, as mentioned before, with the symposiums, and conferences, you go ahead and read your excellent research, Sydney. You may go now.
So from chains to behind bars, the legacy of slavery endures in everyday life, with African Americans still grappling with its effects over 400 centuries. Nonetheless, how does the past truly compare to the present? Octavia Butler's Kindred, a 20th century Afro science fiction novel, explores the impact of slavery through the lens of its protagonist Dana, who travels back in time to an era of enslavement while living in the post-civil rights movement of the 1960s. Butler's Kindred demonstrates the psychological and cultural legacy of slavery, particularly through the lens of post-traumatic slave syndrome, highlighting how historical trauma manifests in the behaviors and struggles of modern African Americans. Dr. Joe DeGruy defines post-traumatic slave syndrome, PTSS, as a theory that explains the ideology of many of the adaptive survival behaviors in African Americans communities throughout the United States and the diaspora. This condition arises from centuries of maltreatment with the absence of opportunity for healing. Common symptoms include diminished self-esteem, persistent anger, and internalized racist beliefs, all of which reflect psychological scars left by slavery. Addressing PTSS requires widespread social and institutional change to combat inequality and injustice towards African Americans. These effects highlights the intense impact of slavery on the mental well-being of African Americans to shape the identity of future generations. The psychological effects of PTSS offers insights into the long-term consequences of slavery and the challenges faced by the Black community today. PTSS stems from unresolved post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, caused by the realities of slavery, leaving Black individuals coping with feelings of vacant esteem and adjustment of behaviors in response to systematic oppression. For instance, the perpetuation of modern toxic masculinity within the Black community can be understood as an attempt to improve self-esteem. A feeling of anger often arises as the Black community navigates a social governed by white norms. The emphasis on the promotion of the nuclear family and traditional gender roles has resulted in many African Americans idolizing this model despite their inhabitability to obtain it. This struggle reveals how slavery's legacy shaped expectations and enforced hierarchy, leaving African Americans in a society that excluded their voices. Hierarchy refers to the power structure embedded in slavery, shaping dynamics of power within the Black race and between Black and white individuals. So this system was built on trauma-based factors such as skin tone, gender, skill level, and age. White individuals had absolute power over Black individuals, controlling every aspect of their lives. The use of violence and denial of human rights created a powerless mentality and agony among enslaved individuals. In Kindred, Octavia Butler establishes hierarchy with which Dana is unfamiliar. Dana encounters a young boy drowning and impulsively saves him, only to face hostility for her actions. I turned startled and found myself looking down the barrel of the longest rifle I had ever seen, thinking I was going to be shot for saving the boy's life. The response to Dana saving a drowning child was screaming and hitting by the mother and nearly being shot at by the father. This leaves Dana in a state of fear and confusion, illustrating the social order of the antebellum South, where the outcome of a Black woman saving a white child is violence. Slavery not only set a hierarchy between races with Black and white individuals, but also created division within the Black race itself. Enslavers often showed favoritism to those with fairer complexions, assigning them domestic tasks, whereas those with darker complexions were assigned outside field work. There was a correlation between skin color and people's lives opportunity. This treatment intertwined light skin with privilege, leaving a legacy of colorism. Black Americans perpetuated their own society, mirroring white norms to create classification in the community based on skin tone. Hierarchy persists within modern communities, reflecting patterns established in slavery. Areas that once relied on enslaved labor have evolved into urban centers with large concentrations of Black individuals. These residents often experience psychological stress and PTSD, which contribute to systematic disadvantages such as lower standards of living. Increased level of violence within these communities are not coincidental, but rooted in historical oppression. Many Black communities are heavy policed, a custom that stems from slavery. On plantations, enslavers maintained strict control over the actions of the enslaved individuals, along with slave patrol. Similarly, modern policing often imitates these functions with officers enforcing control. These dynamics perpetuate harmful stereotypes against Black individuals that continue to marginalize the community. Hierarchy in the antebellum South not only created a rigid division, but also gave rise to stereotypical caricatures of African Americans, which were used to maintain social control. The racial mammy stereotype, for example, implies that Black women are loyal caretakers only fit to be domestic workers. During slavery, the mammy caricature was placed as proof that Black people were content, even happy, at being enslaved. Minstrel shows aired this caricature to spread false narrative to the public. In Kindred, Dana accidentally falls into the stereotype as Black women commonly do. Dana adapts a nurturing role, caring for Ruth and later Alice, mimicking stereotypical actions. As Dana assists Alice, she becomes a mother-like figure. You know, she says, you gentle him for me. He hardly hits me at all when you are here, and he never hits you. In these moments, Dana embodies the protective instinct that many Black women historically and today are expected to have. Similarly, the Uncle Tom stereotype contributes to the marginalization of African Americans in the public eye. The caricature is about African American men who unquestionably submit to authority. The Tom caricature portrays Black men as faithful, happy, submissive servants. These portrayals allow society to feed into the narrative of wanting white approval. White Americans committed to the myth of Black inferiority used the law and violent terrorism to establish and apprehend society that regulated Black Americans to second-class citizenship and economic exploration. These stereotypes continue to strip African American of their voices. In both cases, these stereotypes were used to belittle Black individuals. The unwanting of Black voices in white spaces forced African Americans to engage in code switching to navigate predominantly white spaces, reflecting the continued need to adapt for adaptability in oppressive environments. These modern perceptions reflect the continued need to not be considered a stereotypical Black caricature and leads to discrimination. In modern society, these harmful stereotypes still perpetuated from slavery have a lasting impact today with assumptions about criminality, intelligence, and hyperaggression. These stereotypes have evolved from Black individuals being happy with enslavement to angry or dangerous post-slavery. The shift in stereotypes shaped the way Black individuals are viewed and treated today. The creations of these stereotypes reflect the trauma rooted in slavery. Being enslaved is an unimaginable experience. The psychological effects occur over time, often in unnoticeable ways. Slavery was not a game, it was survival. During slavery, speaking freely was a privilege reserved for white Americans, while enslaved Africans were deliberately silenced to prevent the exchange of knowledge and ideas. The suppression of language was a form of control, ensuring that enslaved individuals remain uneducated and powerless. As Butler demonstrates in Kindred, Dana's silence reflects the survival tactics enslaved people had to adopt, creating a cultural legacy that influenced communication practices today. Dana's evolution in speech and language reflects her adaptation to slavery. Do not argue with white folks, he said. Do not tell them no. Do not let them see you mad. Just say yes, sir. Silence is a safety net enslaved individuals understood. Self-silencing was to protect against pain and punishment. The use of silence is a survival mechanism used to cope with hard situations that Black individuals endured. Many Black women may use or resist self-silencing as a vigilance-based coping strategy to preserve their mental and physical well-being. This silence is used in modern-day behaviors as a form of code switching to silence their identity as a way to not conform to expectations such as being loud and societal pressures put on Black individuals to feel comfortable, such as modifying their speech. Black English, or African American Vernacular English, AAPE, is a language many Black people in America speak. It has controversy as not being considered a language, which stems from the dehumanization of Black individuals being deemed as unable to create. Black English was formed from slavery when different tribes in America were forcefully brought to America and not able to speak in their native language. However, AAVE was viewed as improper and socially unacceptable for those of a lower social status. The downside, AAVE becomes associated with authentic Blackness, pressuring some people to adopt it to feel Blacker. Today, African Americans are silenced when they code switch from Black English to Standard English, as it is common to face discrimination based on the dialect. The language is marginalized from racist ideals. The lingering effects of slavery's suppression of language is a key example of how multi-generational trauma manifests in modern-day communities. Butler's Kindred illustrates the psychological burdens through Dana as she represents the struggles of Black ancestors. Black people are not dark-skinned white people. Furthermore, that was related to the ideal that we came to this country in a way totally different from any other group, against our will and into servitude and vigilance and enslavement. African Americans have a forced entry into society that was systematically built to allow for trauma to arise and destroy a sense of identity. African Americans view the world through history, allowing the understanding of the struggles of the past to continue to influence the present today.
Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you. Powerful, Sydney. All right. And again, those who have just entered, welcome. We're in panel 1 and we will continue. We just heard from Sydney Smith. And now I'd like to bring up Taylor Williams, presenting Investigating the Why Nots of Octavia Butler. Taylor Williams. Okay, if we don't have Taylor Williams with us, then we'll move right along. Let's see here. Next we have up, and if Taylor comes later, we'll just swing back and circle back to Taylor. Next we have up Mariah Sims. Mariah Sims will be presenting Sunday Speculation in Octavia Butler's Kindred.
Hi. Yeah, my piece is called Speculation Sunday. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an episode of Speculation Sunday with your host, me, Mariah Sims. The reason for our speculation in this episode is because too often we stay confined in reality. We should not be afraid of asking questions and speculating about the past, present, and future. Educator, author, and scholar Marcus Haynes defines speculative fiction as a text that forces its consumer to imagine or speculate on possibilities that do not fit in their understanding of the world. Not only do we want to speculate, but we also want to imagine a reality outside of our frame of reference, outside of what we have experienced to be real. In today's episode, we'll be exploring how Black speculative fiction can be used to challenge stereotypes and biases that we experience in our reality. Throughout history, Black women, when they were enslaved, were presented as fearful people. They were supposed to be obedient, and in history, one way that was achieved was through forced silence. But what if we change the narrative? Today's question is, why not a Black woman use her silence to feel empowered, and why doesn't her silence equate to fear? I'll take this question one step forward. What would our history look like if power and autonomy, hand in hand, could be made from the action and choice of silence in a Black woman's narrative? In our society, being silent is seen as being timid or not having the power to speak up in the face of adversity. Afrofuturistic and science fiction novelist Octavia Butler wrote the power of silence into her book Kindred to change the narrative of Dana and Carrie's story and the people around them. Although Dana and Carrie use silence to their advantage, they show it in different ways. In Chapter 4 of The Fight in Kindred, Dana gets sent back to the antebellum South to find Rufus severely beaten. Dana uses her autonomy to control the outcome of the situation. She makes sure that she changes the narrative from the typical historical one. An excerpt from this book presents us with a different truth about history. "Rest a while," I said. "Get your strength back. You couldn't catch him now if he was standing next to you." He moaned and felt his side gingerly. "He's going to pay." I got up and walked toward the stream. "Where are you going?" he called. I didn't answer. "Dana, come back here. Dana." I could hear his increasing desperation. He was hurt and alone, except for me. He couldn't even get up, and I seemed to be abandoning him. I wanted him to experience a little of that fear. By not giving Rufus the peace of mind of being coddled with calming, reassuring words, she makes sure he feels fear and abandonment. She makes sure to listen but will never give him the reassurance or satisfaction of the response he craves. She controls the outcome of this situation. She controls if he gets to die or not. In many cases, having control is powerful. Carrie expresses her autonomy in a more subtle way. Her action is providing. She gave Nigel a family and gave him a life worth living for. I don't think Daddy relaxed until Nigel met Carrie. Man marries, has children, he's more likely to stay where he is. A lot of Carrie's narrative is told and shown through the actions of others because she is mute. However, in her silence, she manages to repurpose Nigel's life. Choosing the power of silence, she reimagines the outcome of his life and made sure he didn't meet the same fate as Luke. Dana and Carrie's silence doesn't equate to fear because in both of their situations, they are helping others who are experiencing fear or abandonment. In other words, their autonomy helps them control the outcome of the problems they are facing. Dana and Carrie are both incredibly socially intelligent and know how to use their actions to control parts of their lives. Although they are from different times in history, they still hold the same intelligence. Novelist and professor of African American Studies, Dr. Daniel Black, in a Zoom presentation called Octavia Butler Lecture Series, mentions how Butler uses time travel to take us outside of our frame of reference. He further implies that she goes back in time to show that Black people's intelligence might have been missed. Both Carrie and Dana know how to hold on to the fact that their sounds can be used intelligently and not only benefits them, but it benefits others around them as well. But make no mistake, these women are not robots. Along with their social intelligence, they are also extremely emotionally intelligent. With intelligence comes the security of feeling comfortable in your rightness. Security is a strong deterrent of fear. Thank you.
Excellent. Great job, Mariah Sims. Thank you so much. Moving right along, and again, those who just entered, we've collapsed all panels into this ballroom A for now. So next we have up, I don't see Jalen Smith yet. So if Jalen Smith comes on later, we may circle back to Jalen Smith. But moving right along, I'd like to now present Kamari Jordan. Will be presenting from the panel Black Women and Resistance in Octavia Butler's Kindred. And Kamari will be presenting Why Not Expose the Shared Realities of Ancestors and Future Kin. Kamari Jordan.
Hi, I'm Kamari. So my paper is Why Not Expose the Shared Realities and Ancestors of Future Kin. What would you do if someone from the future came to you saying they were here to protect you from yourself? What would you do if that person was a part of your family and told you that all the issues of your world would be solved? What if someone came to you and you had no idea who they truly were, but you saw a clear reflection of yourself in them? It's easy to believe this would be about the relationship of Dana and Rufus from the novel Kindred. However, this is about the shared life of Dana and Alice. As the American soul and R&B singer Erykah Badu said in her song, "Didn't You Know?" "I ain't scared to take the wave. I know my heart will guide me back." Dana and Alice had a lot of moments where they had to sacrifice themselves to please the people around them, to make a change, to get what they want. Even when they don't want to exactly give in or do something, they do it anyway because they know it will lead to a difference. That it may allow them to be themselves again. In this aspect of sacrificing themselves, every decision they make will directly impact the latter because they are kin. When Dana is in the process of helping Alice heal, she takes every jab, physically and verbally, because she knows that Alice cannot do this to anyone else. She encourages Alice to make her own choices and to look at things from a different perspective. Alice gives up her body and risks punishment to help out Dana. Dana has the perspective of knowing that Alice is her ancestor and that her purpose while being back in time is to ensure the lineage will continue. Alice isn't aware of Dana's direct connection to her, but uses her as an anchor to provide faith for herself that the world will be different. Both Alice and Dana acknowledge that there is a similarity between them, as seen on the surface. Directly from the novel Kindred, 20th century Afrofuturistic novelist Octavia E. Butler creates a moment when Rufus is comparing them that leads to Alice saying, "We're two halves of the same woman." In this moment, it allows the two to be vulnerable, to recognize and question their attachment to each other and their relationship with Rufus. Alice begins to ask if Rufus takes Dana to bed, explain how well Rufus treats her when Dana is there, and explains that the two truly don't have a choice when it comes to him, except accept or run. The two know they have things in common, but how closely related is not revealed until much later, to Dana alone. There is danger in characters like Alice and Rufus knowing too much about the future. However, based on what they do acknowledge allows for people to create assumptions on their relationships. It leads to danger for Dana when it comes to Rufus because he recognizes so much of Alice in her. Rufus has a twisted perspective of what love is, platonically and romantically. And because of this, he tries to take advantage of Dana as he did many times to Alice. However, it allows for people like Alice to see a future where things are different and have hope that things would be different. For Dana to see the active shift in herself. At the start of the story, the both of them were born free, but only Alice had to originally fear ever becoming a slave. Alice fears and is disgusted by romantic and sexual relations that are with the white man, while Dana is only in fear of the perception. Their lives mirror each other directly, just with different perspectives. Revealing too much could not only shift their understanding, but also the event of what is meant to happen. Alice may have never had Hagar, may have only seen what Dana did as selfish, may have completely diminished what was meant to come. This is why Black speculative fiction exists. In the words of Marcus Haynes, an academic and writer, a text or media that forces its consumer to imagine or speculate on possibilities that do not fit with their understandings of the world is what speculative fiction is. This is possible in Kindred because the reader can ponder on all the reasons why Dana does not reveal all the truth to Alice. Why aren't the two acknowledging their similarities until the end? Why they don't know how their lives almost perfectly mirror each other within their own circumstances? I say it is because of their sacrifices that have to take place. African American Studies scholar and professor Dr. Daniel Black explains that there is sacrifice that has to take place.
My granddaughter go
us.
to Howard. This ain't her.
The reader
She's doing some kind of presentation that's next. So
the readers and Dana to exist and have to take opportunity that we have today. That ours and Dana's ancestors had to pay a price for us to exist in the reality we do now. Had these shared experiences come to light too early or at all, there is a chance that Alice and Dana may not have sacrificed the things they did, or would have made these sacrifices obligatory and done in vain, rather than by choice because they know they both have a purpose. So it's easy to question all and come up with answers to hypothetical questions, but in the spur of the moment, things are quickly to change. Why wouldn't they?
Excellent. Great job, Kamari Jordan. Let's give this entire panel, and I included Kamari in it, but I want to pause for a second for Q&A, but let's give a round of applause. Excellent, excellent, excellent job. I'd like to now open the floor up. If you have questions for Sydney Smith, who presented first on post-traumatic slave syndrome, or Mariah Sims, that's presented on Sunday Speculation and Octavia Butler's Kindred. And then we just heard from Kamari Jordan, why not expose the shared realities of ancestors and future kin? You can go ahead, ladies and gentlemen, faculty, students, staff, guests, family, friends, feel free to unmute, introduce yourself, and ask your question to the panel collectively or individually. We have about 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll continue our presentations into the panel of Black women and resistance. Questions? I know I have a question I'd like to ask the panel collectively, and starting with Sydney. Sydney, I really enjoyed your presentation on analyzing Kindred through post-traumatic slave syndrome, and then taking it into a deeper dive with talking about the minstrel show and the archetypes, the stereotypical archetypes within it, the mammy figure, Sambo, Jezebel, and Uncle Tom, and so forth. And then also the power of linguistics and the code switching. So I like how you mentioned how you could see the after effects of slavery happening within, going in and out with Dana from the present, going back to the past, and so forth. Do you still see that even today in 2024? Are you making a connection from the past, when Dana goes back into the past, from the 19th century to the 20th century, and now here we are in the 21st century? Can you elaborate on that, Sydney? I know that was a mouthful, but can you elaborate? Any observations today?
Yes, I can see like the differences in, I'm not the differences. I can see like how the past can be brought up into today. Like how I see it. So like specifically to Dana. So before, okay, I can see it with now with a lot of, in like the Black community, you can say that Black women are kind of forced to grow up faster. So we can kind of see that with Dana, how like in the beginning of the novel, she's like in a situation where she can like either get killed or like have to kill somebody else. And she ends up getting killed by someone else, even though she doesn't die. But if she didn't have the circumstance where like if she's near death, she goes back in time, she goes back to her time, she would have died. But because of like everything that she endured, she's put in another situation that's also life or death, where she ends up killing the other person to protect herself. So we can see how that can translate today with how like Black women are in a society where we have to like kind of fight for ourselves and put ourselves first, since most likely nobody else will put us first.
That's powerful. Killed or be killed. Whoa. Definitely, I can see Alice Walker's womanist in there too, but the stigma behind that as well. To be womanist is to be bold and outspoken, but that is so powerful. Literally and figuratively, she has to kill off a portion of the past, and she literally, figuratively loses a limb right behind it that is with her forever, permanently scarred. But she, in the end though, does she allow it to keep her down, or do you think she rises above it? Do you think in the end she comes out on top and liberated, or is she oppressed?
I think
forever.
she comes out liberated. Like, yes, she doesn't have an arm anymore, but like one of her arms. But when she looks at that, she will see like it like basically will trans not trans. It's like shows like just all the struggle that she endured, everything she went through, and how she came back from it, and how like she survived it. So I think she didn't feel oppressed by not having an arm. She felt like liberated and happy.
Wow. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Any other questions or comments, reflections for the panel? Okay, well then I'd like to continue. I know I had mentioned the whole panel. Mariah, and Sunday's Speculation and Octavia Butler's Kindred. I like how you started, how you have that as a podcast. Can you elaborate more about your podcast? Was that just for the class, or do you have a podcast, or are you thinking about turning this into the podcast? And what would that look like for future episodes? Would this theme continue, or other great works by Black women writers? If you can just share a little bit more with us, Mariah.
Yeah, so for the in-class assignment, Dr. Boylan was just like told us to imagine that we had a podcast, and that this was just an episode out of many that were either to come or already had happened. So that's why I framed my essay in that way. Will there be a podcast for me? I was thinking about it. Just because I like the idea of Black speculative fiction, and like just how it can relate to like novels and music and other different kinds of creative things. So yeah.
Awesome. And I definitely think it's definitely timely. I think you're on to something, and what an awesome assignment, and how it manifested into presenting at this symposium. Great job, Mariah. Thank you. Kamari, and then we'll continue on. Kamari, and your Why Not Expose the Shared Realities of Ancestors and Future Kin. Kamari, what is your takeaway? What can we learn ultimately from your research? Because clearly we're still battling pointers that you mentioned from your research. What's a takeaway? How can we deal with all of this in 2024 in our own lives or collectively?
I think that something we can take away is that sometimes we have to just keep going. I think that's the best way for me to put that, because going along with the idea of sacrifice that ancestors had to take, we also like one day we're going to be considered somebody's ancestors, and we're going to have to make sacrifices and take chances, as well as kind of honoring the sacrifices that were already taken. We have family members now alive. A lot of us do that, had to experience things like Jim Crow laws and everything. And a lot of them are still like, they're still here with us, and they're still seeing the things that are happening now. And it's, they dealt with that stuff. And while we're still dealing with things now, I think the only thing we can really do is keep pushing and hoping that things will change, because things won't change unless we actively try to provoke it to happen. So that's something I think is something that we could take away from that.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other questions for this panel before we continue? All right, we'll move right along now. So we'll continue with the panel, Black Women in Resistance and Octavia Butler's Kindred. Do we have with us Anaya Stone? Is Anaya Stone here with us? Okay. All right. Let's see here. Who do we have next on our program? Audrey Hunter's up next. Black Woman's Love Books, Octavia Butler's Kindred. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for Audrey Hunter. Audrey Hunter, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Audrey. I'm a freshman psychology major. The title of my paper is Why Not Disrupt the Fears of White Supremacists? It's a podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Black Women Love Books. Today's episode will focus on the book Kindred by Octavia Butler. We will lean into conversation about Black speculative fiction, but the specific question we're going to talk about is why not disrupt the fears of white supremacists? Why would we, as Black people, let the white man scare us into not achieving the greatness we and our ancestors know we can be? In today's episode, we will examine the empowering lens of Black speculative fiction. Black speculative fiction allows us to rehistoricize the experience of Black people, confront the truth of our ancestors' struggles, and celebrate their endurance, strength, and resilience. We can imagine a fuller truth of their history. By disrupting the fears of white supremacists, we not only could imagine a world where Black people's rebellions against slavery succeed, but a world where Black people have more power in our current society. To start today's podcast, I want to discuss some wise words a good brother, Dr. Daniel Black, shared with me that fit perfectly with this podcast. Dr. Black said, Octavia Butler seeks to teach Black youth the unbelievable achievements of a people white folks thought would never amount to anything. But they were wrong. They didn't know whom they had captured. White captors didn't know they had brought over warriors, cooks, farmers, healers, and blacksmiths to this land. Why not imagine a world where enslaved people use these skills to change and empower themselves instead of being victims of oppression? Imagine a world where enslaved Africans utilize their expertise to create a society of their own. This would also shatter the white savior narrative. White supremacy thrives off the myth that enslaved Africans needed them to survive, but clearly, enslaved Africans had all the skills to survive on their own. We see how strong their physical endurance was and how smart and able they were to adapt to their environment, creating secret codes through their hair and through song to communicate. We have Dana, for example, teaching enslaved people how to read when she is traveling back in time. The book Kindred shines a light on the power of enslaved Africans. Butler used the education and literacy of Dana as a way to disrupt white supremacy. We see how Tom Whalen was threatened in a way by the fact that Dana could read better than Rufus, his white son. Dana's time traveling is a disruption because, in a way, Dana is reclaiming parts of her and her ancestors' history. Kindred is also disrupting the myth that, again, enslaved people needed white people, but this is not true. Enslaved people could resist and survive with the skills that they possessed. There are so many examples of this in Kindred, but there is one that I want to bring up that shows the fear of the white man. Tom Whalen says, Daddy always thought you were dangerous because you knew too many white ways, but you were Black, too Black, he said, the kind of Black who watches and thinks and makes trouble. This is what Rufus's dad, Tom Whalen, told him, and he proceeded to tell Dana after Whalen's death. Dana had been causing a sense of fear and anxiety in Whalen throughout her time in the past. She has displayed a personality and skills beyond what a typical enslaved person has, which has incited fear or anxiety or both in Whalen. This quote shows how Dana is disrupting white supremacy by staying true to herself and what she knows from her present life and bringing that to incite fear and anxiety in the white man. To close out this podcast, I want to talk about a music selection for today's episode and test how closely you all were listening. In the background of this podcast, I've been playing the song Fight the Power by Public Enemy. The message of this song is to emphasize the importance of resisting power. Power in this song is white people. Black people are fighting to resist the power against white people and everything that they have done to put us down. I picked this song because it relates perfectly to how Dana has transported back in time and had to resist oppression and the authority of her slaveholders. Tom Whalen and Rufus, who attempted to dominate her, but Dana did not let that happen. She used her skills and resourcefulness to disrupt Tom Whalen and Rufus's view of a typical enslaved woman. Thank you all for tuning in today's podcast of Black Women Love Books, and I will see you next week.
Excellent. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions for Audrey Hunter? Any questions? Wow. Well, Audrey, I want to begin by asking you, what was your initial thought when when you started reading Octavia Butler's Kindred? How did you feel at first about reading a book about slavery? I mean, was it what you thought it was? Was it a huge surprise to see that it was actually an Afrofuturistic genre book? What were your thoughts about it? And then how you birthed this podcast? I think your professor is onto something. And what do you see the future with it?
Yeah, so this is my second time reading Kindred. I read it my junior year at high school, and every time, since this is my second time reading it, when I read it, it was just a reminder of everything that our people had been through. I don't think classes, especially at my old school, they don't really teach what actually went on during slavery. And the way that Octavia Butler put it in this Afrofuturistic way, where it's like sci-fi and cool, but you're also getting hit with so much painful information that happened to your own people, but she's putting it in a way where you can really understand and feel what was going on. And I feel like I feel like a lot of Black girls can even look to Dana as like, wow, like she did these amazing, powerful things, and I can do these amazing, powerful things as well, to be a good ancestor, to help protect the world and help make a better place for Black women. And then your second question about my vision for this podcast. So this was really, it was an assignment. So I mean, I don't plan to make a podcast for real and like continue to do that. But maybe if I were to keep reading books that really hit, like reading Beloved by Toni Morrison was a really hard book to read and it really hit. And I would definitely make a podcast about that. But yeah, as of now, I don't really know where the podcast is going to go, but I did enjoy making this podcast for the project.
Absolutely. Great point. And I love that reference to Toni Morrison's Beloved, because, you know, if you think about it, both Kindred and Beloved focus on what? Black women grappling with the trauma of slavery, you know, and as our first presentation that we heard, and even the post-traumatic slave syndrome, and you know, the aftermath and the beauty of it going in and out, you know, the memories and the snapshots and going back and forth, and you know, Dana and Steph's struggles, how to illuminate how historical violence transcends time, shaping modern identities, and Morrison's concept of rememory, you know, and it's you know, and even today, you know, when we were thinking about the common text and questioning, you know, Octavia Butler's Kindred, but you know, will that be a trigger? But also, however, though, the importance of rememory, you know, and this isn't just this was so powerfully done because it's going in and out the past and the present, very similar to what we're doing today and remembering, right? And the power of remembering, where the past persistently, you know, invades, disrupts, interrupts the present. And every time we see reminders, it's like a trigger, right? Like what happened recently with the elections, you know, no matter which way you voted, it did something. It resonated with a lot of Black women. You feel me? It did something. And some of us are still processing that, right? And I would love to open it up. I know we got 15 more minutes, but I definitely would love to open it up. If at any time, please feel free to unmute. I know this is the inaugural symposium, but yes, we need to have more safe spaces and conversations, you know, about this, because this is a novel, but this is our story for many of us, for the voiceless, you know. So, you know, and it echoes Dana's going, you know, with Beloved's echoing Dana's physical journeys to the antebellum South, emphasizing, you know, this cyclical nature of trauma. It's very cyclical, and it's like no matter how much one tries to escape from it, these great works can offer a blueprint. So as we conclude our panel discussion from these phenomenal, excellent presentations. And I thank you again, all of you for your panels for this first section. So as we conclude the panel discussion on Octavia Butler's Kindred, let's keep in mind that it's essential, as the presenters have highlighted, to reflect on how the novel's exploration of trauma speaks to both historical and contemporary issues today, here in 2024. Butler's narrative not only delves into the psychological scars of slavery that was talked about earlier, but it also places these experiences in dialogue with the lasting effects of systemic oppression and systemic racism and systemic sexism that we deal with today. As we've learned from these panels, in Kindred, Dana's involuntary time travel to the antebellum South forces her to experience the brutal realities of slavery firsthand. You know, we talk about it all the time. Even students in my class, before they read this book, they admitted that they would say, they couldn't have had me back in slavery. I would have did, you know, I couldn't have lived back then because I would have did this or did that. And then they said, after reading Butler's Kindred, they had a newfound respect and the importance sometimes of having to do what you have to do and code switch in the name of survival, and not a form of selling out or being weak or whatnot, but they had to do what they had to do, you know. And this trauma, you know, is symbolized in the book by Dana's return to the present, left without her arm. You know, literally and figuratively, she had to cut some things off. You know, this visceral representation of the lasting damage that slavery inflicts, even on those that are distanced from it by generations. Now, you know, here we are in 2024, and as the panel showed, we are distanced from slavery, you know, ending here in the USA in 1865, yet we are still traumatized by it, you know, and this reflects the inescapable legacy of slavery and its echoes in modern systemic issues, such as, i.e., what, mass incarceration, racialized violence, economic disparities, still dealing with issues regarding unfair treatment to women, people of color, due to one's race, classism, sexuality, education. The list goes on. All these isms and the systemic barriers that are in place to keep it systemically aligned and to keep that glass ceiling and that brick wall relevant. So, for instance, and then we'll go ahead and break for 10 minutes before we get ready to reconvene for our keynote address. But for instance, let's think about contemporary movements like what? The Black Lives Matter movement, or the Me Too movement, or the Say Her Name movement, all highlight the ongoing trauma experienced by people of African descent due to violence and systemic isms, systemic forms of oppression. And just as Dana's experience shows how the violence of the past permeates the present day, when we think about that, today's racial trauma is a direct descendant of these historical injustices that we're grappling with today. Studies like those, you know, from the Pew Research Center show that the majority of Americans acknowledge slavery's lingering impact, with African Americans disproportionately affected by its systemic repercussions. Yet for some reason, there are debates, as we know, about don't talk about it, don't teach about it, don't have them read about it. And that's the beauty that I love. And I know all of you collectively, presenters, can definitely testify to the beauty and the liberation at Howard University, and keeping in alignment with our mission statement that this is necessary. This is your foundation, your roots, as Malefi Asante says, the father of Afrocentricity over at Temple University. You have to know who you are and whose you are before you can even go in and out assimilating. You are the ones we've been waiting for, the great leaders of today, of tomorrow. But you have to know, and through these great literary works, this is laying the foundation. This is forcing us to go back and rememory so that we don't suffer from cultural amnesia as we prepare and as you cultivate, as you continue to be cultivated here at Howard University in the first year writing program through the Department of English, so that you can go confidently in and out of these spaces and places and lead without any questions about who you are. So we definitely want to keep that in mind as well as we bring this panel to a closure. So as we reflect on the great presentations from these panels and on this discussion, let us remember that works like Kindred and what have we mentioned also? James Baldwin's, we have Baldwin's event coming up December 1st, The Fire Next Time, works like that. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and Toni Morrison's Beloved. And even our own colleague, Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. These great works are necessary. They should be in all of our permanent personal libraries, because they serve not only as powerful stories, but as vital tools for understanding and addressing the trauma that continues to shape our society now more than ever. So I thank each and every one of you. And we have questions. We're going to open it up, and then we'll take a little 5-minute break before we start with our keynote address. I see Ashley, hands raised, and this is, you can unmute at any time. Yes, Ashley.
Hi, Dr. Akasi. I was just noting in the chat, it does look like we have a Kimura person here whose paper, Why Not Reclaim Power by Resisting, I know is somewhere on the schedule. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. O'Donnell. And I apologize. The video wasn't on. So for a second, I said Ashley, because I have an Ashley too. I do apologize. Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. Yes. So if you like to go ahead and present, because we stick to schedule around here in the first year writing program. So if something say 12:30, that doesn't mean 1 o'clock. We dive right in, right on time. So please, if you're ready, please go ahead and you can present now if you're ready. And you can just unmute.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Please give it up now for Kimura Person. And Kimura, if you can just restate the title of your presentation and you can go right in.
Why not reclaim power by resisting? Welcome to today's episode where we're digging into a deep, powerful, provocative question. Why not reclaim power by resisting? It's a question that makes us pause, especially when we think about it in the context of Black history, the legacy of oppression, and the ongoing fight for justice. But more than just ask why, I want us to consider how resistance can be a form of empowerment and how Black speculative fiction allows us to explore this dynamic in ways that connect the past to our future. Let's start by looking at Octavia Butler's Kindred. Here we have Dana, a modern Black woman who was literally dragged back into the past, into the horrors of slavery. Now, Butler could have chosen to tell a straightforward historical novel about slavery, but instead she blends speculative fiction with history. Why? Because through speculative fiction, she's able to force a reckoning with the past in a way that makes us question our present and imagine alternative futures. Dana's journey is not just about surviving in an oppressive system, it's about navigating the complexities of resistance. In Kindred, Dana's resistance doesn't always mean revolt. Dana doesn't arrive in the past wielding weapons, nor does she organize upbringings. Instead, her resistance is deeply personal and strategic. She navigates the terrifying world of slavery with a keen understanding of when to resist openly and when to resist subtly. In this way, Butler reimagines history through the lens of power that's often denied to Black people that can be reclaimed in ways that are far more layered than simple defiance. Dana demonstrates resilience when she endures physical and emotional pain, determined to survive her time, saying, I will not give up, despite the challenges she faces. Here, Black speculative fiction becomes a tool for re-examining historical tragedy. We can mourn the truth of slavery, recognizing its brutality, but Kindred demands that we also celebrate the ways in which enslaved people resisted. Whether through survival, maintaining relationships, or small acts of defiance, enslaved people always found ways to assert their humanity. Dana's existence in both the past and the present create a dialogue between the two times, highlighting the strength it took just to survive, let alone resist, and a system built to break you. Dr. Daniel, in his keynote address, speaks to this when he talks about the need to re-examine history, not just to mourn, but to honor the resilience embedded in Black excellence. Black speculative fiction provides a lens for this, and the genre becomes a form of resistance. It's a space where imagination refuses to accept oppressive realities as unchangeable truth. So when we ask why not reclaim power by resisting, we're really asking, what does resistance look like? It's not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about the quiet determination to survive, to rewrite the story that was imposed on you, or to dream of a future that's radically different from your past. Black speculative fiction shows us that resistance is not just defiance, but creation, a reimagining of what's possible. It honors the past while refusing to be bound by it. That's the power of this genre, and that's the power in reclaiming your story. Let's continue to resist, reimagine, and rewrite, because that's how true empowerment happens. Writers like Butler use speculative fiction to imagine worlds where Black people can thrive, not just survive. These stories reject the idea that oppression is inevitable or that history must repeat itself. Instead, they ask us, what if? What if we resist in ways that challenge not just the system, but also the imagination? This brings us back to the question, why not reclaim power by resisting? Black speculative fiction argues that resistance is multifaceted. Sometimes it's in the everyday act of surviving against systems meant to dehumanize. Sometimes it's in the bold of reimagining a future where Black people hold power, not in opposition to oppression, but in full autonomy of their own lives. This reimagining is a radical form of resistance because it challenges the very foundations of the narratives we've been told. So the answer to why not reclaim power by resisting lies in the stories we tell ourselves. Resistance, as seen through the lens of Black speculative fiction, is about reimagining what's possible, honoring the past, while dreaming new, liberated future. This genre provides a framework for understanding that resistance isn't just rebellion. It's the everyday act of refusing to accept a world that tries to limit us. It's the creation of a space where Blackness is powerful, where history is reclaimed, and where future is a canvas for possibility. In her lyrics, Badu references cosmic spirituality, but also the need for self-determination, singing "The Mothership Can't Save You." This is an empowering message. True salvation and freedom come from within, much like Dana's ability to navigate both the present and past in Kindred. Here, Badu is reminding us that even in the face of confusion and hardship, we have the power to resist and reclaim ourselves. Both Badu and Black speculative fiction offer paths of self-discovery and empowerment, encouraging listeners and readers to re-examine history while envisioning liberated futures. Thank you for listening, and I hope this episode leaves you thinking about how we can all resist by imagining. Thank you.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you. A round of applause for Kimora Person. Any questions or comments for Kimora Person at this time? Any questions? All right, Kimora.
I have one.
Yes, go right ahead. Yes, thank you, Dr. Harris.
Okay, sure thing. First of all, Kimora, that was a great piece you read and wrote. I'm asking this question not only to you, but to a couple of speakers before. I'm somewhat of a semi-music head, a little bit, and I keep hearing Erykah Badu's name being referenced, and I think someone else said Public Enemy. So these are artists from the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s. What I want to know is, I want to expand my horizons a little bit here and there and get a little bit up to date as far as the artists of the 2020s. are there any artists that we can look out for or listen to right now within hip hop or R&B and who sort of take the mantle of all those artists before and push it in this particular time and space, especially as Dr. Akazi keeps saying, you know, where we are right now, we can use all of the inspiration we can get. And, you know, we've gotten it from PE before, we've gotten it from Erykah Badu and many others. Who are the artists of this time period that we should be looking out for, if anyone, and that's open to you or anyone else, any of the other students who want to answer that question?
I would say personally J. Cole, but in our class, I don't remember what specific song it was, but we were going over a Janelle Monáe song, and that was like our example for like the whole podcast. So that was also a good one.
Okay.
I like that. I would definitely have to add also Kendrick Lamar to that as well.
Okay.
The only artist that's ever won a Pulitzer Prize as well.
Now those are artists that I'm up on J. Cole, I'm up on Miss Monet and Kendrick Lamar as well. I'm talking about someone in their age group or maybe in their 20s, because all of these artists are in their anywhere from their mid to late 30s. So I want to see someone in their age group, someone around college age or a little bit after that. I'm pushing the envelope here. But it does, if you really can't think of one right now, that's cool. You might think of it later on, or just, you know, it could be put into the chat or whatever. But like I said, I'm just trying to see Rhapsody, yep, in their 30s. She's in her 30s too, and what have you. I'm looking for those 20-somethings and see what they're coming with. I see a Cleo Soul. Is that person in their 20s? Because see, I'm sounding old right now. Is that person in their 20s? So, you know, I'm trying to, you know, push you guys to let me know who's out there in your age group.
That's a very powerful question. I think it's turned into a rhetorical question now. It's like crickets. It's like, okay.
No, it's cool. It's cool though. It just, all of this, when they started talking about music, it really piqued my interest, and I was listening out to see who else I would hear.
Yeah, I know that there was questions about is there a space, a genre for protest music? You know, and I noticed the hype around the Obama era. I forgot the artist. Of course, that's not in their age bracket, but My President is Black. I forgot the artist. My President is Black. My Lambo too. I forgot the name.
I can't remember. Yeah.
But you know what song? The beat. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let me stop. But you know what song I'm talking about.
There's quite a few examples in chat. The students are putting examples in chat.
Okay, I see Doshi. Okay, I'm gonna run.
Yep. Okay. Cleo.
That's good to know.
Rhapsody, Doshi. Okay, now I'm showing my age. Is it?
Yeah, I haven't heard of Doshi before, so I'm gonna check that out for sure.
Oh yeah.
Or Cleo Soul.
I feel you, Dr. Ayuwa. I'm stuck in the 90s and the 2000s. I think that was the Renaissance, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Corey Lamont said Dr. Lamont said it was Jeezy, what the song you were talking about, I think.
Oh, gee, thank you. Yeah, we may have to go ahead and play that. Yes, but great point made. Professor Harris, we may have to turn that into a panel for the big conference coming up next semester. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. It would be interesting too, you know, if we were to get some of these artists from, you know, in their 30s and so forth, Gen X, there you go, pardon me, Gen Z artists, in conversation with the millennial artists, and bring them to Howard and have a interesting round table about that and protest music. Wow.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you for allowing me to ask that question.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Harris. Thank you. All right. Any others? Great conversations. All right. And keep in mind too, I'm really excited because these presenters, their papers are going to be edited, expanded, and published. So this is big stuff happening for these students today as freshmen. I mean, we're coming in with a big bang. This is highly impressive. All right. we'll go ahead and keep it going. So if you need it, do we need a minute to stretch, or should we just roll right ahead for the highly anticipated keynote? It's 1:36 now. Are we good? Well, we're virtual anyways. You can pop in and out as you wish. All right, without further ado, now I would like to present to you all one of our very own from the first year writing program, Dr. Jaquetta Iowa. PhD, is a former secondary level English language arts teacher and principal from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Dr. Iowa entered Morgan State University's English doctoral program in 2018 and has since earned her doctorate degree in 2024 in English. Dr. Iowa's research, yes, congratulations. Her research interests include, but are not limited to, 20th to 21st century African American literature, Black gender studies, cultural studies, and Black cinema and media studies. Dr. Iowa is currently a lecturer of first year writing and African American literature post to 1940 at Howard University. In addition to teaching, Dr. Iowa is a professional writing tutor where she provides one-on-one writing assistance. Dr. Iowa is also founder and CEO of Petty Professor Writing Services, LLC, where she provides a simplified approach of writing studies for K through 12 teachers, as well as offering supplemental writing assistance for K through 12 and post-secondary level students. Outside of the classroom, Dr. Iowa is an active and proud member of Zeta Phi Beta, Sorority Incorporated, Nu Sigma Zeta Chapter, Harrisburg, PA, where she serves as an undergraduate advisor for collegiate level members. Additionally, she serves as my right-hand woman, co-advisor for the Sigma Chi Delta International Honor Society Theta Theta chapter here at Howard University. And we just had an amazing induction ceremony last week where she and committee members of her peers are currently planning the organization's second annual Composition, Rhetoric, and Research virtual conference. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please give a round of applause for our very own Dr. Jaquetta Iowa.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Akasi, for having me aboard. First of all, let me stop real quick because Kimora person, you didn't have to do that. I need Kimora to give me my eyebrows and my edges back because you snatched me. You came out the woodwork saying y'all forgot me on the program, but then when she started speaking, it was just profound. One thing that I took from Kimora's speech was resistance is not defiance, it's creation. That's one of those statements that you kind of have to just like sit with, because we look at our current generation as being defiant, as being resistant, but are they really being those things? Or are they just looking at the same issue that we've been looking at through a creative lens? So definitely shout out to Kimora, that was outstanding. Second of all, Professor John Harris, you made my knees hurt. I was feeling very ancestral with the hip hop reference because I'm still stuck in the New Jack, the Silent Storm era, early 2000s, lean with it, rock with it. That's around the time I went to college. So we're going to have to remove him from the Zoom because you cannot insult my age.
Excuse me, I'm a 1990s undergraduate. I graduated in 1990, so no, you're a youngin'.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'll take it and run with it. As long as they still ID me, as long as they still card me. But it is truly an honor and a privilege to present to the general body some of the key lessons that I've gleaned while reading Kindred. So about 2 years ago, I was first introduced to Kindred while compiling a list of texts for my doctoral comprehensive exams on 19th and 20th and 21st century African American literature. And I've heard of Octavia Butler before by some of my colleagues in my cohort, but after reading, honey, let me tell y'all, but after reading the prologue to Kindred, I began to understand why her reputation precedes her. Her prologue opens with a very simple but impactful sentence. I lost my arm on my last trip home. Now, my honest and initial reaction to reading that sentence was, girl, what does that even mean? What kind of home are you coming from? Or what kind of home are you going to that you lost your arm? Like, teach me thy ways, right? But as I delved deeper into the text, I came to the realization that Dana is essentially battling the two realities of two completely different worlds. Nevertheless, she refers to her time jump back to Maryland in the 1800s as home, all while simultaneously settling into a new home with her husband, Kevin. Now, this was interesting to me because the plantation to which she time jumps to is dangerous, and staying in her new home did not even bring her the solace that she needed because she was living in the fear that at any time that she could be abducted back to the plantation. The text reads on page 17, I moved uncomfortably, looked around. I feel like it could happen again, like it could happen anytime. I don't feel secure here, on page 17. So in this keynote address, I would like to focus on bridging literature and society. And for all my English 102s and 055s, I live by the 3-point thesis statement. So I'm gonna give you guys 3 points of departure that you guys can take notes on. So some different parts of departure that I would like to give you all are, 1, what do we define as home? What is home? What does that mean? Point number 2, we cannot make our home in the past because when we do, we always lose something in return. And 3, the past only harbors our traumas, period. Period. Big purr, okay? So let's jump into point 1. How do we define home? Can home be defined as a place of refuge, or can it represent a place where we are transported to only when we are summoned to serve the needs of others? I, like Dana, and maybe some of you guys as well, have always been stuck between 2 homes or 2 worlds. I'm a first-generation college student and the only person in my immediate family to hold a terminal degree, only homeowner, the only person married, so on and so forth, the first of many, right? And I say that to say that I am called on a lot. I am summoned a lot to de-escalate situations for my family back in Pennsylvania. And as an undergraduate in the early 2000s, I struggled with balancing the reality of my new home at Shippensburg University of Pennsylvania and my family drama back home in Harrisburg. Whenever I went home, right, it was not to rest, it was not to wash clothes or to catch up with friends. It was because I was summoned to serve. I was summoned to help. I was summoned to intervene, summoned to de-escalate. And each time I returned back to campus, I was more fatigued and stressed out than when I initially left. Similarly, Dana seemingly transports back to the Wayland plantation, and each time she arrives, it is to de-escalate whatever Rufus was in at the time, whatever situation Rufus was in at the time, or to help out Alice. Readers see this in the chapter called The River, where she saves Rufus from drowning. We also saw in the fire where Rufus tries to burn down the Wayland plantation or the Wayland mansion because he didn't get the horse he wanted. And we also see it in the fall when Dana helps nurse Rufus's broken leg back, and so on and so forth all throughout the text. Now, Dana's actual home is in 1976. And Dana's actual home in 1976 is considered a place of refuge for Dana solely because of Kevin. Now, their home is not a traditional home. It's not a home in a traditional sense. It is a home because Dana and Kevin share similar traumatic experiences with time traveling. Though initially bewildered after seeing his wife vanish before his eyes, Kevin nonetheless supports Dana's need to travel back in time. So much so that he even packs her a go bag, or what the young people call a spending the night bag, okay? The text suggests that Dana and Kevin are all they have because their families are
Everyone else has just
and
read their
unsupportive
papers.
of their interracial marriage. They are essentially trapped in a world of their own until they are both trapped on a wheat plantation
If
together.
everyone gets to show the scope of
Which
their
then
like,
leads
I don't
me
even like
to my
this
next
paper.
point. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. Somebody is unmuted and they are telling us the business. Okay,
Please,
there they go.
yes, please, somebody mute. I was looking for them to mute
They
it.
telling their business. They don't like the paper, and that's okay.
Now go ahead. Go ahead.
Point number 2.
Little Freudian slip there. Freudian slip.
Okay, big one. Point number 2. We cannot make our home in the past because when we do, we lose something. Dana loses Kevin for 5 years in a whaling plantation. That's it. That's the tweet. She literally loses her husband. Not only does Dana lose Kevin for those 5 years, but Kevin ultimately loses himself. Now, during this 5-year gap or 8-day separation, as the book interprets for us, this 8-day separation from Dana, Kevin is exposed to the traumas of American chattel slavery and experiences difficulty adjusting to life back in 1976. Observing her husband's traumatic response to being home, Dana reassures Kevin on page 194. Kevin, you can't come back all at once any more than you can leave all at once. It takes time. After a while, though, things will fall into place. Like Kevin, I also found that settling back into campus life was difficult after long weekends, being back home, dealing with family drama, de-escalating, intervening, all of the things. But as Dana suggested to Kevin, slowly and surely, my motivation and my stride came back. Another thing Dana begins to lose each trip back home to the Wayland plantation is her sense of reality. So essentially, her worlds begin to blend. They started to blur, right? 2 emanating instances are depicted in the chapter The Storm, where on page 193, Dana ruminates. No, I shook my head, denying the impression. This house was nothing like the Wayland plantation. Butler presents a second instance in this chapter when Dana notices a change in Kevin's accent. She observes on page 190, he had a slight accent, I realized. Nothing really noticeable, but he did sound a little like Rufus and Tom Wayland, just a little. I shook my head and tried to put the comparison out of my mind. Now, these 2 scenes implicate the underlying traumatic and physiological responses that people like Dana and Kevin experience when spending excessive time in high-stress environment. Point number 3, the past only harbors our traumas. In the wise words of an astute scholar named Glorilla, Big Sister Glow, Big Glow, not the little one. At the end of the day gotta end. Now, this saying summarizes the ultimate finality behind a long series of events. Therefore, at the end of the day, Dana recognizes that regardless of how many times she attempts to intervene in these hyperstimulated events with Rufus, he is exactly who his environment has created him to be. And the death in which she tries to save him from so that she can preserve her lifeline, she eventually commits herself. Nevertheless, Dana remains tethered to Rufus, so much so that it is difficult for her to assimilate back into the 20th century. Dana even continues to carry her denim bag, her go bag, her spending the night bag, in the event that she is summoned back to the Wayland plantation to serve Rufus. Kevin tells her on page 244, you know, someday you're going to have to stop dragging that thing with you and come back to life. Hell, half the time I wonder if you're not eager to go back to Maryland anyway. This exchange between Kevin and Dana, it gives me pause. And it makes me wonder. And I also pose the same following questions to you as well. What emotional baggage are we carrying from our past that consequentially affects our home or our world today? How can we untether ourselves from the places and the people who we assume were at one point beneficial to our lifelines, to our futures? In closing, Kindred encourages we, the readers, to define what home is. It encourages readers to make their homes in the present, not the past. And finally, it encourages readers to recognize that the past is where our traumas live and should remain. Though the time travel, through the time travel exploration of Dana, we can see the wear and tear she experiences each time she interacts with Rufus, and how each jump back home distorts her reality of what home really is. 1976 with Kevin. Even Kevin jumping back through time with Dana causes him to be traumatized and experience difficulty in reassimilating into 1976. So I encourage you, young scholars, budding African-American literary scholars, to not only continue reading, but to continue doing what you have shown us today, the evidence of what you have given us today. Read between the lines. Why? Why is it important to read between the lines? Because it is the things that are unsaid that echo louder than what is actually said. If you know, you know. Thank you.
Outstanding. Please, let's give our keynote speaker, Dr. Iowa, another round of applause. Wow, 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 wow. Excellent, excellent. Now we want to open it up for questions and answers from Dr. Iowa. Questions and answers. Pardon me, questions or comments? Questions or comments? And please just go ahead and unmute. Sometimes we don't always catch it in the chat. Any questions? I know I have a comment and a question, Dr. Iowa. I love how you're referencing and pulling some very critical quotes from the text and applying it again to even to modern day, even a popular pop culture with Glorilla and so forth. And I'm just curious about that because Glorilla is a womanist at his finest. I'm sure Alice Walker is like, woo. You know, she's been in the same rooms with some prominent women, such as Vice President Kamala Harris as well. Can you make a connection with some of these modern day women, Gen Z? And I know all the students that are here at the symposium can relate, but what do you think? Because Professor had asked a question a few minutes ago about if there are any musicians today, you know, that one can look at that that we can look to as reference, but in particular, women. I mean, the women are right now. I don't know what's going on, but I'm a fan. I mean, it's like they're out, they have taken over the industry and they're using their platforms in ways in that Glorilla, she's, you know, she even has a song that's basically giving awareness to abuse. And we see a lot of this. Black women go through a lot of abuse and we don't talk about it. You know, we come from a culture where you just don't talk about it and we wear our scars and that's, you know, that's why we continue to just whew. You see where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And even Vice President Kamala Harris, you know, and what we just experienced, and people ask like, really? And you know, and they're like, we've been going through that. I mean, it was just put on public display again, remembering back to the past. But what is your thoughts about that and these young women musicians today that are serving as a voice for today? And is there some type of connection? Are they in conversation with the late great Octavia Butler, who was way ahead of her time. I know that was a lot, but I'm curious. What is your thoughts, Dr. Ayu?
So one thing that we learned about African American literature, or when we talk about the literary tradition, we know that one echoes another, and so on and so forth. So a lot of what Glorilla, going back to Cardi B, and Megan Thee Stallion, all of these women, is that there's an ongoing conversation, but their contribution is entering into that cipher, that ongoing cipher, right? Like they're entering into the conversation with a creative, because we know that we're not going to use resistance, but a creative approach to these ongoing issues. And to kind of circle back to what you said in the beginning, things that we didn't talk about, and that's the key thing. We, us millennials, we did not talk about it, therefore somebody else has to, right? One of the things that Toni Morrison said, especially about The Bluest Eye, was that she wrote a book that she wanted to read, but nobody has written it yet. So she went ahead and did it herself. And one thing Black women, we're going to do it ourselves. If nobody else is fitting to do it, we're going to do it. And a lot of these younger voices are contributing to that, as I said before, that ongoing cipher. They're echoing the things that might have been, stated before by MC Lyte, Queen Latifah, Roxanne, like they're echoing and continuing on in that legacy. It's just that the perspective it's new. Sometimes people can get a little bit uncomfortable with new. People can get the ick with the new. But if we actually, as we do text, if we give that text grace and actually read the words, we have to do the same with our new voices of rap and R&B and all the things. We have to give them space and grace and listen to the words, because they saying something. It's just our responsibility to hear the something.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Other questions, comments?
I actually do have something to say. I'm sorry, just so I don't mispronounce your name, your last name. How do you pronounce it?
Dr. Ayewo.
Hi. Okay. So you say Ayewo?
Ayewo.
Ayewo. All right. So I know that you talked about how in Kindred, whenever Dana will always come back to 1976, her mental wasn't always the best. And I know how you related that to like whenever you come back to Howard from Harrisburg, that you also feel you changed in a way. So even though for Dana her mental health definitely was bad coming back from the antebellum slavery time, she also in a way kind of gained strength. Do you feel like that whenever you come back from Harrisburg in a way that you feel stronger, more mature because of the problems you have to handle, or do you just feel like burnt out and feel like that you're wasting your early adult like years and stuff?
So I love that question. And when Dana travels back, yes, she comes back just not a little bit defeated, but she knows a thing. She knows the thing. And she always goes back with a fresh new perspective of how to solve that thing, solve that problem. And sometimes when we spin the block, if we go back in the past or we go back to the situation that might have been painful, we learn a little bit more about that thing that has caused us that pain. So now that we have that thing, we can name that thing, and then we can make steps of resolution to heal that thing. And I feel that with Dana, each time that she went back, even though like, girl, stop going back there, stop, don't open that door, don't pass go, don't collect 200. It was a learning experience for her time after time. Even though she came back with scars, it was still that interconnectedness, like that tethered learning. It was, yeah. Does that answer your question, Nyla?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nyla, woo, you just opened up Pandora's box with that question. Because, yeah, I mean, a lot of us, here at Howard, Dr. Iowa, as she mentioned, home is back in Pennsylvania. Home for me is back in Cincinnati, Ohio. There were many times, especially during grad school and the doctorate program, because when you're under pressure, and a lot of you all college students are experiencing now, sometimes real intense pressure can resurrect things from the past that you tucked deep in the psyche, where you may have even forgotten about it, and then the stress will cause it cause us to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to dread going back to Cincinnati, Ohio as a grad student when I was over doing my doctorate over at Morgan State University, because it kept reminding me of open wounds that I still hadn't addressed. And my way of dealing with it was, which wasn't healthy, but drowning myself into the graduate program and just ignoring it, and so Butler, oh, she's a genius. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Dr. Iowa, and you brought that question up, Nyla, because it brings it full circle. There's a lot of times we don't want to go back to that past.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to. And, there are times, and then you have to deal with, as Black intellectuals, sometimes Thanksgiving coming up, where it's this struggle where you have to constantly remind the community, I'm still that person. I don't feel better because I'm in school now and I'm bettering myself. And yes, sometimes I even have to code switch because, if I'm not speaking my mother tongue, the African American vernacular English, then it's all type of teeth sucking, like, she's
there she go again.
Yeah, there she go talking like a thesaurus, and she thinks and it's like, wait a minute, so then it's this tug of war with identity going back to the past, and how do you negotiate and renegotiate and balance that?
Yeah.
And Butler shares it best.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to go back to the past, and we have to teach our people, our community. We've got to go back, and you have to find ways, even though they resist. Remember how they were and they were saying, "Oh, girl, you better quit talking that way. You're gonna end up catching them hands." I mean, you don't want to end up on the chop block. I'm telling you, Dana, you better pull it back.
Yeah,
and she finds ways, and we constantly, especially as Black women, and me being the oldest, and like you, Dr. Iowa, and the only woman of my siblings, and my dad's preacher. I'm getting too far out there, but I'm just gonna bring it back home. But my mom was one who practiced the cult of domesticity to the utmost, and I used to get punishment whoopings all the time for being womanist as a little girl. But we have to, regardless of those stigmas that come, you have to be outspoken. You have to find ways to uplift your communities. I mean, take care of yourself. But Butler says it best. She shows it. Even if you lose an arm in the process, that's woo. I think Travis Sharp. I'm gonna pull back.
I was about to jump in. But I want to see Sharp.
Go ahead, Professor Sharp. I gotta go. I gotta regroup. Go ahead, Professor Sharp.
I mean, I'm very happy to make space for continued jumping in, but my question actually relates to the symbol at the end of her losing her arm. In an interview, Octavia Butler says that she has to she had to have Dana lose her arm because she couldn't come back whole, right? Because chattel slavery doesn't leave people whole, right? But what I'm especially interested in is the alignment. And of course Butler is like such a precise writer, so it of course has intentionality behind it. And I'm wondering, Dr. Ayewa, what you think about why it is the case that Rufus's hand and the wall of her house with Kevin cut her arm at the same place. And do we read that as like her house with Kevin also injuring her in the same way that Rufus does? Or is it like cauterizing the wound of the past? Right. There's different ways of reading it, both optimistic or pessimistic, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Now, Dr. Sharp, you must have been reading my mind. One thing I always tell my students when they say a thought that I was about to say, I'm like, get out of my head. Don't live in my head. It's interesting because, travel with me, she loses her arm to a white man attempting to rape her, but falls into the white man she married. Let's marry the two. Let's make it make sense. And I think that the implications or the allegations on Kevin being an abuser when it was the other white man in her life, which was the abuser, having to hold lies, a whole space for the lie, so that Kevin was still protected as she's also protecting Rufus. That's the space, and that's the thing that always it gets me. Kind of like Toni Morrison, where how you think Morrison's text is today. When you wake up tomorrow, you're like, let me change I think it's this. It's the same way with Kindred for me. It's just that the way it ends, how it ends, it's just, what is the connection? I without trying to get into the intentional fallacy, it's why. Why did Octavia Butler make Dana travel back in time to intercede the actions of Rufus to make sure that he's alive so that she's alive? And why is it that Octavia Butler created this narrator to still go home to someone who started to look and sound like her oppressor in 1976? Now we know that Virginia v. Loving, when did it come into, I think it was passed in the late 60s, early 70s. So it wasn't that far removed. Yes, they were living in California. However, the law was still, recently passed? I'm not a historian, but I thought it was interesting that she chose for her narrator to go through PTSS while living with a white man who's going through PTSD, and they've shared the same similar harshities of slavery. That to me was just, I'm still sitting with that. That's something I'm still grappling with, the why, and trying to settle on the why. Hopefully that answers your question in some way, Dr.
And can I just jump in with that also, Dr. Iowa? And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Professor Sharp, because this is we're gonna go there now, because it's Dr. Iowa has to sip her tea. This is deep. We're gonna go there, Professor Dr. Sharp. So this is my take on it. So remember her own husband, when he travels back in time, he even unconsciously slips into, to paraphrase, maybe it's not too bad. And it's just like, what the hell? Did he just, and so that in itself is complex, because as the former president over at Spelman, what's her name? She wrote the book, Why We Don't Talk About Race, or Why We Can't Talk About Race. I'll get her name in a minute. But she makes a really good point where she says, as soon as you land on American soil, soon as you inhale and exhale, you can't help it. It's in you. Racism is like, you cannot, avoid it. And it's just, and he just, unconsciously, and he's married to this beautiful Black woman during this time when it still wasn't settling well. Even today, we still grapple with things like this. And so, and even take it there, my ex-mother-in-law is Caucasian, and her, she had married a Black man, which was, and they had biracial children. She and I were really close, but even she would sometimes slip and unconsciously say microaggressions, and she didn't even know. And that was a teachable moment. And I would have to tell her, like, look, as a Black woman, that's not sitting too well. That's a form of microaggression. And she would just look oblivious, and she would say, I had no idea. I didn't even know. I wasn't even trying to go there. And and just to go more narrow, because I just made a personal example, but I think, like with Octavia Butler's Kindred, Dana's decision to return to her white husband, and keep in mind, of course, we want to keep the book separated from the author, but and I think it was Dr. Parker, the alumna, the last keynote speaker, that told us that Butler was a very tall, dark complected woman, short hair, and she had a crush. I forgot who the person was. It was a white man as well. But not to make connections there, but just to put that out there. But Kevin, is deeply tied, to a lot of the themes of love and, partnership and survival and the complex dynamics of race and power, because you have to keep in mind that he's not only white, but he's a man, and during this time, the patriarchal society, it was male dominated, like on steroids, and so we have to keep in mind that we're dealing with that too, not just race, but we're also dealing with these gender disparities, and the roles, and, to go back in time, and it's like, whoa, I'm really, I was here in the 20th century, but, wow, 19th century, I'm like here, and you got to catch yourself like, I'm liking this, I'm sitting up on top, and she had to pull back, they even had to, during this time, they're not even married. It's the law. But so she has to slip in and out at nighttime to be with her husband, just as a reminder, into two as one. But, despite all of the challenges, I think that there's shared experiences and connections, and why she ends up going back with him in the end, with the time travel trauma. Both of them are dealing with time travel trauma. Dana and Kevin, they share this unique, as Dr. Aya was said, different types of traumatic experience. Post-traumatic slave syndrome for Dana, post-traumatic stress disorder for her husband, right? So, and this shared ordeal, I think it creates a bond, between them, an unspeakable bond that people on the outside might not be able to relate to on their level, and Kevin, having also been stranded in the past, like her, becomes one of the few people who can truly empathize, with Dana's struggles, and the horrors that she endured. And then, then the love and partnership, there are a lot of people today, and the beauty of interracial relationships and marriages that deal with a lot, even, and I'm sure that they dealt with a lot in their present as well as the past, but it was just even more heightened. So, you're dealing with, despite the racial tensions and the societal pressures surrounding their interracial marriage, Dana and Kevin, they share that deep emotional connection. And then Kevin's role as an ally, despite, his slip up of, I'm feeling this, and she had to check him, he became like her ally. We have to remember that there were a lot of allies back then. Even Frederick Douglass, a lot of the white women were his ally, because a lot of times back then you couldn't do this on your own. So, that support from the past. Kevin often acts as a protector and an ally for Dana. We have to remember that. And he recognizes those dangers that she faces as a Black woman. And maybe he didn't really get it in their present, but when he goes back, he sees it up close and personal. And he is like, whoa, like, oh my gosh. A lot of times where people say, I don't know what it feels like to be Black, so, I can't really relate. It was like up close and personal for him. So why he still can't, fully understand her experience of racial oppression, I think he demonstrates, like this willingness to try to empathize, to support her and to fight against injustice. And that is very important, I think, for us as Black people, as Black women. We need more allies. If you have if you are considered of the dominant, there are ways that we can use the dominant as allies. Even during Black Lives Matter, when I was marching with my students, white students that said, Dr. Akasi, with all due respect, and that's out here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, they said, let us stand in the front, because we were marching past the Ku Klux Klan. on this big bridge in Fredericksburg, Virginia. They said, Dr. Akasi, let us stand in the front as the allies. You, the professor, go to the back with the blacks. That was very hurtful, but it's our reality. And because of that, we were able to continue to march past on the bridge. And we thought we were safe all the way up until one of the black students in the back, as we were marching, one of the old SUV Ford Explorers, she purposely hit him. And it crushed his soul. It crushed him because it was done intentionally. So the importance of, we need you. We need us. We need to be allies. Heterosexuals as allies for the LGBTQIA+. Black men as allies for Black women. White men as allies for white women and Black women. And the list goes on. So I think Butler also shows the power of why she goes back and the importance of the ally and acknowledging of privilege. Again, and maybe I shouldn't say dominant, the privilege. Okay, scratch that, not dominant, but the privilege. You know, if you're privileged, Kevin shows an awareness of his privilege. And we have to acknowledge that. I'm a white man. I am privileged. You know, so as a white man, he attempts to use his privilege to help his Black wife, Dana, in critical moments where they're able to strategize to survive. So I think that's among many reasons why she goes back to him.
She sees that inner good. She sees that even though he was lost, he wasn't lost. His spirit, his heart wasn't lost. And he even tells her of his unique experiences of watching women and children die in childbirth and having to deliver children on his own. She sees that now that he's seen it, now he can believe it. Not saying that he didn't believe it before, but sometimes things don't hit unless you can physically be there to see it or witness it. And so Kevin is a witness in racism and no longer a bystander. When his sister rejected he and Dana's marriage, he was a bystander. He was like, oh, that's crazy. And then also when Dana's aunt and uncle rejected them, they took the position of bystanders. But now that they have this shared trauma, the shared experience, they're a little bit more active in the reality. And in the reality, they are in 1976 California as an interracial couple. That's the reality.
Whew, that is so true, Dr. Iowa. Man, I mean, Dr. Sharp, thank you for, I mean, that question, you have no idea. You just made my weekend with that. Now I'm about to go on the writing bench. And I think we need to go ahead and do a co-authorship article on this, Dr. Sharp, Dr. Iowa, and I. Because I think that needs to be talked about more. You know, in 2024, you're starting to see more Black women are starting to enter into these interracial relationships. Again, Butler was a woman way above her time, you know, and it's going to come up, the complexities there. Interracial, one of my best friends married to a white man, and she even said she had the schooling during Black Lives Matter because he didn't understand it. And at one point she said, oh, I'm about to leave him because he's not feeling me. But then, you know, she had to pedal back, and they were able to, you know, reconnect, and they've been married for over a decade now. But sometimes, you know, you have to really pedal back. It's very complex. Even today, you know, as you were saying as well, Dr. Iowa, Dana's return to Kevin is not a simple, easy choice. You know, it's not easy, but it reflects on her resilience as well. You know, it reflects on her resilience and her commitment to navigating, you know, the complexities of identity, you know, who she is, and her partnership during those challenging times. and even today, and the strength of it. It's not going to be easy, but the strength of being able to come back together and try to move forward through these, because we do have these universal connections as well. But I definitely think that privilege point resonates as well, because the last thing we want is this vicious cycle of the oppressed oppressing the oppressed. We'll never get ahead by doing that. Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Kind of in response to the discussion that you all have had here, one thing that stood out to me was that, like you all had mentioned, Dana and Kevin go through this same broad level experience of time travel, and then they obviously have very different experiences once they're there. And so similarly, once we see that like final return, one key difference is that, you know, our now witness, Kevin, walks away probably with PTSD, but physically relatively unscathed. But Dana walks away with something visible, like something visible that indicates to others what she has been through. In addition to, you know, obviously PTSS. And as we're reading through the novel, we start out knowing about, you know, this, you know, physical injury and, oh, that's so terrible. And then obviously the events, you know, unfold a little bit differently. So I was curious if you all had thought about the significance of someone seeing or being able or having like that public manifestation of injury, trauma.
Say the last part of your question one more time.
What I was just saying, what have you all or have you all thought about like the significance that Dana's walking away with a physical, visible symbol of her trauma and what she has experienced?
How can I say this? I'm trying to find a response that doesn't make it seem like the trauma Olympics. Like, oh, this person, my hurt is more hurt and your hurt is, because I believe hurt is hurt. Again, understand that there's different degrees of hurt, but at the end of the day, hurt is hurt, trauma is trauma. It can't be weighed or quantified, but I think that with Dana taking more of what Octavia Butler illustrates as the bigger brunt of the abuse is what we see in 2024. With just like that constant state of anxiety, constant state of going back, that constant state of fear of being hurt and hurting.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, I want to get to the trauma because I get that Dana was hurting. I get she was hurting, and also get that Kevin was hurting. But it's kind of like what Dr. Sharp said in the chat. It's like, all right, Kevin, take your boo-boo. I lost an arm. You got a boo-boo. But go ahead, Dr. Akasi.
Yeah, I'm in conversation, but and a great question, Dr. O'Donnell and Dr. Iowa, just to piggyback and to expand what you're talking about, we got to keep in mind they both come back traumatized, but she comes back, you know, there's this profound thematic, symbolic, constant reminder that she has to take to the grave with her. You know, so not only psychologically and mentally, but physically, this physical constant reminder. I don't care how much you try to obliterate it. I don't care how much you try to wipe it out of the textbooks. I don't care how much you try to keep it out of the classrooms. This is the ugly reminder of what has been done.
Yeah.
Not just on a micro level, but on a macro level, not just local, not just nationally, but internationally. This is the ugly truth. And this is the ugly truth, this ugly, nasty reminder until we face it. and sometimes, and with that physical injury, with Dana's arm, I think it's the climax of the novel. It's Dana loses her arm. And as you mentioned, that powerful sentence to begin, I lost my arm, on the way home, and this is during her final travel encounter with Rufus. But why does Butler begin with that sentence at the end and then paddle its way back, and when she tries to pull away, when we think about Rufus and how she tries to pull away from him, as he clings to her arm becomes embedded. Remember, it becomes embedded in the wall, even in the modern home, during her return to the present. So it's this constant reminder and this symbol of lasting connection of slavery. Yes, that's in the past, but it's still a constant reminder, because Dana's severed arm, it symbolizes the inescapable. She cannot escape it. This is inescapable connection, and it's between herself and the legacy of slavery. And even today, people say, I don't talk about that. That stuff is in the past. I don't have nothing to do with that. That's our ancestors. No, it's inescapable connection. And despite her return to the present, you would think, oh, that was a dystopia era. Now, finally, I could go back to my, this utopian world. I don't have to deal with that anymore. It follows her into the present, just like with us. It's here in the present, and the energy, her injury and losing her arm, I think it serves as a permanent reminder of the brutality and the bestial violent side of slavery, and what she endured and what her ancestors endured at an emotional cost. It's a reminder of, don't you dare try to sugarcoat this and say this is a form, slavery wasn't that bad. It was a form of domestic servitude, and we saved them. Don't you dare. This is a reminder that Butler is bigger than losing her arm, and then finally, I think incomplete healing. I think losing her arm is still it's incomplete. The fact that Dana loses a part of herself is also highlighting that the trauma of slavery is not something that can entirely it can't entirely be healed or erased, because we're still dealing with post-traumatic slave syndrome, as Joy DeGrasse says. So it continues to leave this mark on individuals and collectively. It's forever imprinted into our memory, and now physically. And every time we see the physical, it's a trigger. Because as I mentioned before, stress causes stuff that we tuck away to resurrect. And then when we see a physical, i.e., what just happened with the presidential elections, i.e., the Black Lives Matter movement, even going back to Trayvon Martin, this becomes the physical reminder. And I'm just saying this I think it's in conversation with Butler and Dana's losing her arm as well. That's my thought to add to what you were saying, Dr. Iowa and Dr. O'Donnell.
And just to quickly add, because I know we're at time. The imagery that came to mind when you said her arm was stuck in the wall was kind of like a shrine after you go hunting, like how some people hang the spoils of the hunt on the wall so that you can remember, oh, this is something I tried, this is something I did. But at the end of the day, it's a reminder. And then another thing that came to my mind was during the BLM, ALM versus ALM movement, like Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. It's kind of saying like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, all lives matter. Bro, I'm missing an arm. You have an ouchie on your forehead. Let's make the main thing a main thing. So those are a couple things that just popped into my head, was the shrine, and just, like the juxtaposition between Black Lives Matter, Dana losing an arm, and All Lives Matter, Kevin got a boo-boo on his forehead. That could be healed with Neosporin. maybe a stitch or
Absolutely. Absolutely. It reminds me of Alice Walker's short story. Forgot the darn it, can't remember the name. The D and Maggie and the quilt and hanging it up on the wall like this is what was it called? I forgot the name of that short story. Everyday use. And she's like, I'm gonna hang it up, as a trophy. No. Every yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Wow. Round of applause again for our keynote speaker and the lively. That's when you know you had a good speech, because then you opened up Pandora's box. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Whew. All right, so we're going to continue now with our next panel, 2:30 to 3:30. We're going to begin with the panel Rewriting the Slave Narrative in Octavia Butler's Kindred. And we're going to begin with, I don't see Jordan Akin. If Jordan Akin is here, go ahead and unmute. Otherwise, I'm going to just go right to Esther. Esther Amusu will be presenting on Echoes of the Ancestors. Why not? An examination of Octavia Butler's Kindred. Please give a round of applause for Esther Amosu.
Hi, everyone. I'm Esther Mosu. I'm a freshman psychology major from New Jersey. I actually wrote my paper in form of a podcast as well. So, yeah. You're listening to Echoes of the Ancestors, with our intro for today being They Don't Care About Us by Michael Jackson. I'm your host, Esther Mosu, and I am more than thrilled to celebrate the utmost brilliance of Black speculative fiction with you all today. As a Black woman, I love indulging in how these stories reflect my experiences and aspirations. Today, we'll be discussing Kindred, written by 20th century Afrofuturistic novelist Octavia E. Butler. This is a stellar novel that follows our main character, Dana, back to 19th century Maryland, where she connects with her ancestors, just not in the way she would have expected to. And stay tuned to the end, as I have an added surprise for you all. Before we fully dive into that, I'd like for us to tackle today's fitting choice of intro music. This song, written by singer-songwriter and dancer Michael Jackson, yields powerful lyrics about systemic injustice and the dehumanization of marginalized communities. These resonate deeply with the narratives we will be exploring in Black speculative fiction, whether it's Dana's struggle to survive in a society built on slavery, or her journey between worlds that forces her to confront the brutal realities of oppression. Her story echoes the same cries for justice, recognition, and the fight to reclaim her humanity. As an added benefit, while listening to today's episode, think of this song playing in the background of Dana taking risks to protect herself and those on the Wendland plantation. Doesn't it just seem fitting as her theme song? Let's start somewhere simple. What even is speculative fiction? Thankfully, we have a definition of speculative fiction defined by scholar, author, and professor Marcus Haynes. Speculative fiction, a term coined by Robert Heinlein in 1947, was originally used to make a point that the term was different than the more serious science fiction that we are used to. Not all horror and science fiction is speculative. Yet, as for speculative fiction itself, we are required to reimagine the rules of the world in a completely different way than what we already know. It's good not to be required to be so straightforward with our thinking all the time. We should be encouraged to venture out of the usual line of thinking, to broaden our horizons and think further than solely out of the bubble. Going one step further, Black speculative fiction allows Blacks to challenge global anti-Blackness and even encourages any type of reader to accept the various aspects of Blackness. This is exactly what Butler does in Kindred, especially challenging Dana to go back to a point of slavery to see the different aspects of her lineage. Now, you may be questioning my verbiage when it comes to Dana and her journey throughout Kindred. Yet, was she not fighting a continuous battle? I would say so. I would also say that she is much stronger than myself. From going back and forth between my timeline and my ancestors, to enduring terrible physical abuse and living conditions, for me to return home to my husband and be in an unknown quarrel with him. I don't know if I'd be able to endure as much as she did before she was able to let herself go home willingly for the first time. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Why not? But why not what exactly? Why not allow a modern Black woman to lead a rebellion? And in specifics, why not let Dana lead a rebellion against the Wellens? Now, you may be thinking, Dana never led a rebellion in her time in Maryland. Well, your thinking isn't wrong, it's just misdirected. Let's begin by asking, what exactly is a rebellion? I know for those of you who have read the book, you must be wondering when exactly the rebellion takes place. You're plagued by the common idea that a rebellion has to be loud and maybe even close to destructive for it to be considered something of a rebellion to begin with. However, a rebellion is simply any action or process of resistance to a form of authority or control. Now, that is something we see in Dana. Despite her forced necessity to protect Rufus, she still manages to defy his rules and whatever commands he manages to give her to ensure the goodwill of herself and in turn her people. Let me provide you a line in Kindred. Quote, Sam didn't do anything, I said. You sold him for what you thought he was thinking. He wanted you, Rufus repeated. So do you, I thought. It was time for me to go home. I started to get up. Don't leave, Dana. End quote. Dana, with the harsh personality she had further developed in 19th century Maryland, continuously defies whatever command Rufus gives her and modifies it to serve her own purpose. However, in that scene, Dana doesn't leave immediately. She gives Rufus a false sense of hope of her presence, something she had learned to do frequently, and goes further than just leaving the room. She goes back to her modern day home out of anger and frustration. Another example is when Kevin returns to the Wetland plantation for Dana. They get caught in a standstill between Rufus and his rifle. Quote, You're not leaving, he shouted. He sort of crouched around the gun, clearly on the verge of firing. Damn you, you're not leaving me. I had pushed him too far. I was Alice all over again, rejecting him. End quote. Dana goes as far to lead her rebellion by putting her life on the line. She wants to prove to Rufus that she is not beneath him and they are on the same level. If not, she's on a level even higher than his own. This is also not her first time doing this. When Rufus was poorly explaining his involvement with Alice and Isaac and the fact that he had raped Alice, Dana used her strength and her grit to fulfill her mission of protecting Rufus, all the while still favoring the want to protect Alice and Isaac by letting them escape with their lives. As promised, I have a surprise for today's listeners. Here on the line with me right now, we have our very own Dr. Daniel Black to answer some questions about Butler's work. Dr. Daniel Black is a renowned scholar, novelist, and professor whose work focuses on the African American experience. Let's welcome Dr. Black. Listen, thank you tremendously. Thank you so much. Tell me about Kindred. Octavia Butler's Kindred is a sacred prayer offered on behalf of Black youth who might possibly believe that they would have fought against slavery harder than their ancestors did. As someone who falls under this category, I did get that memo from Butler as I read more and more lines of Kindred. It was like a large slap in the face that reminded me that despite whatever I say I would have done if I were in one of my ancestors' positions, I would have been in the same position as them, fighting for my life, whatever the cause was. How do you believe Dana's time travel highlights the interconnectedness of past and present, especially in the context of racial identity and survival? You are the hope and dream of a slave. You are the hope and dream of somebody who came before you. That's the power, that's the legacy, that's the inheritance, that's the assurance of what it means to be Black and young. You're very right about that. All the children on the Wayland plantation have aspirations of being just like Dana. They see something in her that they want to recreate, even though originally they were a bit scared and worried for her. They witness her persistence and her grit, and they want to start by learning to read and write like she can. Dana teaches them, despite the order from Wendland not to do such. Octavia Butler seeks to teach Black youth the unbelievable achievement of a people white folks thought would never amount to anything, but they were wrong. They didn't know whom they had captured. They didn't know the fight, the energy, the determination, the zeal, the commitment, the hope, the vitality, the fortitude, the grit, the passion, the fervor, the strength, the courage of African people. White captors didn't know they had brought warriors and cooks and farmers and healers and blacksmiths to this land. Yet once they discovered it, they began to beat us because they wanted us to know who they thought we really were. And that's the power of Kindred. It's been wonderful speaking with you, Dr. Black. Do you have any ending statements to leave our listeners speculating? No setback can cancel the setup of your destiny. Thank you, Dr. Black. It's admirable how much power you hold in your words. It brings motivation to my heart. Thank you so much. And as for my listeners, I hope you enjoyed this special surprise because I know I did. Let's bring everything together. Dana's rebellion and Kindred is expressed through her personal and subtle acts of defiance, rather than her leading a traditional uprising that we would hear about or witness on social media. She manages to teach Nigel to read in secrecy, which undermines the power structure that was created to keep enslaved people illiterate. Her constant refusal to fully submit to the roles forced upon her, like challenging Rufus, is also a form of her resistance. Dana also proves her rebellion by protecting Alice, offering support to her and refusing to allow her to be destroyed by this unfair system. Dr. Black successfully aids our thinking in viewing Dana's mission and her journey in 19th century Maryland as being with purpose, rather than her randomly being transported on a random day to save a white slave master's son. She, thanks to Butler's astounding speculation, can pay her ancestors back by going backwards rather than forwards. Through this, as it was put by Dr. Black, she learns of the determination and grit that her ancestors possessed and also has her own experience of what it looks like to be one of her ancestors, waking up every day to fight a seemingly never-ending battle for their lives. As today's episode comes to a close, I want to leave you all with this thought. What is Michael Jackson trying to sell us here, other than a catchy song? Jokes aside, he's trying to sell this art as a cry for justice, one that echoes across our current timeline and even fictional ones. Just as Michael Jackson had envisioned a world where our marginalized communities rise, Black speculative fiction allows us to imagine possibilities where we not only survive, but thrive against all of the evil forces that might be against us. I'm reminded of Dana, who found herself in a similar situation as she was physically forced to fight against a system that devalued the existence of herself and her ancestors. Until next time, keep imagining, theorizing, and speculating about a world and a future that you believe in. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great job, Esther. Great job. Excellent. Next, we have up, and again, remember with the panels, we'll go through the panels and then we will have Q&A at the end for the speakers on the panel. So next we have up Imani Monday, and Imani Monday will be presenting Speculating Hope and Love in Kindred. Imani Monday?
Yes. Is it possible I can share my screen?
Of course. Let me
Okay.
go ahead and make you co-host. Okay, go ahead. Great.
Okay. So I'm Imani Monday. I'm a freshman architecture student here at Howard. I'm from Los Angeles, California. And I titled my presentation Speculating Hope and Love in Kindred. And I'll just start off with my presentation. So 20th century Afrofuturistic novelist Octavia E. Butler uses Afrofuturism to show that even within the horrific history of slavery, there's resistance in the free future that was meant to happen all along. Dana, the main character in her critically acclaimed novel, Kindred, serves as a symbol of hope that the people long for. She is afraid of the consequences, but she still makes powerful choices like teaching the slaves on the Wayland plantation how to read. Like African American studies scholar and professor Dr. Daniel Black says, Kindred is about struggle, but it is also about getting through the struggle triumphantly. Dana is accumulation of her ancestors' strength and the carrier of survivors' blood. The love between some of the characters really stick out to me because the time of the early 19th century seems like it would make it really hard to love openly. It definitely seemed difficult to show happiness or any type of positivity considering that the owners would punish slaves for doing something as simple as breathing. So specifically the sister relationship that grows between characters like Carrie and Dana, as well as Dana and Alice, raises the serious question that Butler answers: why not Black women finding sisterly love in the midst of slavery to portray sisterhood's glory? It feels so much more powerful to show the truth of Black love while something as ugly as slavery is going on around them. Dana is constantly brought back to the early 19th century, and though the Wayland estate feels more and more like home, it doesn't take away the fact that she feels uncomfortable and fearful to go back each time. Butler brings awareness to this issue through characters like Alice, Carrie, and Sarah that help her believe she can make it through. Those relationships are ones that Dana had to foster from scratch and all on her own. All three of those women have been through a lot when it comes to the treatment from slave owners, Tom, Rufus, Jake, the police. But through it all, Dana has stayed determined.
Are you muted? I'm sorry. I don't know if it's just me. I can't hear. anymore. Imani, I think you're muted.
It looks like her screen is froze.
Okay, we can hear you again. Okay. Imani, are you with us or did your screen freeze again? Maybe Imani, you may want to.
She may be logging back in. It looks like her screen froze and now she's not there.
Okay. We'll wait till she Thank you, Miss Douglas. Maybe we'll give her a moment to try to get back in. The technology's been going really good thus far. Okay. Okay, well, maybe we'll pause for just a second. Maybe we'll take like oh, there she is. Hi, Imani, are you with us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. You can continue.
Okay. Okay. I think that maybe it's the sharing the slide that messed it up, so I'll just say it. She's consistently brought back and the slave owners like Tom, Rufus, Jake, and the police, but through it all, Dana stayed determined. Once Alice acknowledged that she hadn't been treating Dana well, she asked, "Why you let me run you down like that? You've done everything you could for me, even saved my life. Why you let me talk about you so bad?" Dana simply responds with a question asking Alice why she even does it. When Alice admits that it's because Dana is the only one that would let her, she responds, "Don't keep doing it," I said. "I have feelings just like you do." From that point, the girls' friendship grew as Alice started to get better from her bio injuries from white officers and the weight of emotional loss from her husband. She was able to fully realize how much Dana just wants to help her. Some of the love shown within the novel is scrambled and ruined, but Dana shows to these women that it doesn't have to be, and that she has their backs for no better reason than she believes in them. Love is the hug Carrie gave Dana when she saw her again. Love is the way Alice affirms Dana to not worry about getting hurt again because she would take care of it. In the novel, this scene speaks volumes. "Just rest," Alice says to Dana. "Carrie and me will take care of you as good as you took care of me." I didn't try to answer. Her words touched something in me, though, started me crying silently. The focus here isn't the fact that Dana felt horrible for having gotten caught for running away. It's the importance behind Alice, Dana's ancestor, taking it upon herself to take care of Dana after ups and downs both women have been through. The three of them together take the power back of their own pain. The sisterly love that blossoms in this novel are the work of Black speculative fiction. The moments that Alice actively helps Dana find her husband, fully knowing she will not face the same reality, is a side of slavery that isn't often shared. It shows the pure community that was built on the land that excluded them. Scholar, author, and professor Marcus Haynes says eloquently, "While the truths have always been there, Black speculative fiction shows us that its particular means of accessing these truths allows the oppressed or subjective voice, perspective, spirit to be fully and genuinely and effectively embraced and appreciated." Dana brings a new perspective to the slaves on the Wayland plantation. Some of them see her as the new girl that kisses up to Tom and Rufus, doing whatever they say, when really she is slowly working at taking the power that was owed to each Black person there. Unlike some of the others, Dana is truthful and demanding to Rufus, which is something he is entirely not used to. Coupled with Haynes' words, Black speculative fiction situates Black people at the forefront of the story, both as tellers and as the characters whom we listen to and follow in order to understand the truth. The fact that Dana herself is telling the story of love, struggle, and determination in the novel is what makes it much more impactful. Society wants women to be subservient and quiet. Carrie was spared, unlike her siblings, likely based on the fact she is mute, serving as the perfect way for her owners to ignore her. Dana still showed her kindness and offered to teach her to read, as well as giving Carrie her own choice for once. She gave Alice the choice of what she wanted to do with her body to show true respect. These women have nothing to prove and band together since they are treated like outsiders. They choose love even when they are hurt, showing that love is always the way. Thank you.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you so much, Imani. I know we will definitely have questions for both Esther and Imani. Great papers. We want to continue it on. Next, we have up
movie and nobody had run it by them. So that's something else that actors are concerned about, is having their likenesses taken and used even beyond their life in ways that they can't consent to. So,
I was gonna say, I heard that, or either it was, I think it was that character, but also like, I think it was Luke Skywalker, the original actor. Yeah.
okay. All right. So next, if you have your programs with you. So next, we're going to hear from Tamaya and Christopher. Why Not Wednesday? An examination of speculative fiction in Kindred. Tamaya and Christopher?
Hey, it's Tamayan. Thank you.
Tamayan, thank you so much. Everyone,
No problem.
round of applause for Tamayan. And you have the mic.
Okay, so it actually starts with Blue Lights by Georgia Smith, but I couldn't figure out a way to play that for you guys, but it's okay. All right. Welcome. I'm your host, Tamayan Agbe, here with you on Why Not Wednesday. You just listened to Blue Lights by Georgia Smith, a song that actually speaks towards the themes of the topic today, Black speculative fiction. The track touches on the key ideas of Black speculative fiction, asking readers to imagine new possibilities and realities unconstrained by the institutions of racism constructed to marginalize. But as we like to do here, let's get deeper and ask, why not use speculative fiction to challenge the way that we understand history? What if Black speculative fiction is more than just entertainment, maybe a tool to reimagine past transforming the present? Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you all, like me, love Black Panther, but what if movies like these were seen as more than entertainment? Speculative fiction has the possibility of reshaping our understanding of everything around us, including our place in the world, history, the future. Today, we'll explore how Black speculative fiction transcends past storytelling, a force of transformation able to rewrite narratives of history, empowering social change. An exemplary model for this would be Kindred by Octavia Butler, a book I just recently finished reading. The protagonist is a Black woman named Dana, living in 1976. She gets transported back in time all the way to the antebellum South. You wouldn't guess why she gets sent back, but to repeatedly save her distant white ancestor Rufus, the son of a plantation owner. Yikes. The task constantly puts her in a position to confront the brutalities of slavery. Award-winning scholar and Dr. Arthur Black, who we'll discuss more on later, eloquently states the price that Black ancestors paid for Black life in America is a key theme of Octavia Butler's work. Throughout the novel, Dana learns her own survival is connected with struggles of those before her, hence the reason she is sent back to save them, essentially saving herself. She struggles with the acceptance of the reality in which she experiences slavery, reflecting, quote, "I never realized how easily people could be trained to accept slavery," end quote. This emphasized the psychological impact of slavery on enslaved individuals and also those perpetuating the system. Dana acknowledges her connection to the past and learns to make sacrifices. Butler, through Dana, expressed the deep desire to challenge the idea that surviving slavery was a physical battle. It was also about navigating mental and emotional compromises forced on the enslaved. It looks like we have a viewer sending question. Hold on. Thank you, Tom. Why speculative fiction, and why not more straightforward historical narrative? Good question, but it's because Black speculative fiction in Kindred's case allows for Butler to ask vital what-ifs that force us to confront past tragedies through a modern lens. Butler does more than just tell what happens. She forces us to reimagine it through Dana. Who could even imagine going back to such a horrific time and what it would be like? By doing this, Butler tells us how speculative fiction is more than escaping reality, but about engaging with it could challenge our own assumptions. Dr. Black. Now we're going to talk about author Dr. Black. Dr. Black further emphasizes how Kindred forces readers to understand the price Black ancestors paid for Black life, as she gave a keynote presentation I was lucky to attend at my alma mater, Howard University. He comments on Kindred, quote, "The price Black ancestors paid for Black life in America is the real theme of this model," end quote. Immediately, I'm urged to think of Butler's portrayal of Dana's journey, as she is literally pulled into the past and is forced to understand the sacrifices made to allow for her existence. Additionally, Dr. Black emphasized the importance of acknowledgement for the resilience that flows through Dana's veins from her ancestors. He says, quote, "Dana had to step back in time in order that she could see how the blood in her very veins was thinking about her before she was ever conceived," end quote. Dr. Black reinforces the power of Kindred, establishing it as more than just a story about time travel, as it pays homage to sacrifice, strength, and survival passed through generations. Well, it looks like we're approaching the end of our time here on Why Not Wednesday. I know we discussed a lot, but I ask you to remember at least one thing. Remember Black speculative fiction as more than just a genre, rather as an act of transformation. No matter the work, whether it's Kindred or Black Panther, the stories make us ask ourselves, why not reimagine the past in a way that can empower us to transform the present? No more thinking of these stories as entertainment. Let's start seeing them for what they really are, calls to action for a future in our control. Thank you, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. We're going to open it up now for questions, comments. Questions, comments. You can just unmute if you have a question or comment. I know I have one to begin. Esther, your presentation was very powerful. Everyone's presentation powerful. But Esther, you approached it with your presentation in a way that I didn't really think about it before. The power of sisterhood. Brilliant. My question for you is this. So if we were to say that the three characters, the three main women characters in Kindred represented the Black woman as one body, if we looked at it through an Aristotelian lens, Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos. What is your response to that? Is this possible? Do you think it's just a coincidence, or do you think Butler is trying to tell us something is this just a coincidence that we have these three main Black women characters? Could they represent one whole body that's fragmented, one representing maybe the logical side of Black women, another character representing the emotional side of Black women, another character representing the credibility side of Black women. But in the book, they're fragmented, broken apart into three separates. What are your thoughts about that, Esther?
I definitely have thought about that, like before when I was reading the novel. I think it is like when I was reading it, I thought that Dana took more of like the logos approach because she was more like sensible. She had facts. She came with everything. Like she just put it all on the table. I also think Alice was very much ethos, I would say, because she was the more like emotional, like heart-wrenching kind of character. And when you were reading, like you really did feel for her. But as for like the whole Black woman being, subjected to fragmented parts, I personally do feel like that was intended by Butler because it made us read the novel in a different kind of way. Like you could see everything just in different parts, kind of. So you were seeing everything through a different lens, and you were getting your information from like quote unquote a different source, a different experience, a different perspective. And I feel like that in itself helped me to break down the novel even better because it wasn't just a straightforward approach to it. And I also think that aids in the whole idea of speculative fiction and speculating as a whole. Like you want to be invited to think more openly rather than just having a straightforward way of saying like this is how the author wrote it and this is how I should understand it. You should be able to have your own kind of understanding in different fonts, different ways. I hope that answered the question. I did go on a little tangent there.
Yes, no, that's good, Esther. Yes, and I think she's definitely trying to remind us of the power of sisterhood. During slavery, it was done on purpose, and we see that unconsciously we're still doing this, separating, tearing each other down. But when the sisterhood is real, it's very powerful when we come together. But during slavery, it was purposely keeping us separated on purpose. Why would something be, why would people go to the extreme in the novel to keep the Black women separated? Why? Because people know, society knows that when we come together, we are an unshakable, phenomenal force. And I think that even resonates today. And I can definitely, like you said, I can see it with, from your presentation, I can see it with Dana, Sarah, and Alice. I can see, like you said, Dana representing like the logical appeal side, the rationale, and how she often acts as the voice of reason. I could definitely see that. I could see it, with the cook, and the Whelan household, how she, with her, I was thinking maybe the ethos, because of her, the resilience and her survival, and she uses her position to maintain this protective mode, this protective mode of the Black woman. And then I think that, like you're saying, the I think the side of what was it? I had to take some notes on it. Yes, and Alice, definitely the tragedy, but Alice representing pathos, the emotional side. And I think Butler is a rhetorical genius, in doing this and showing, signifying the power of the Black woman when we come together versus the fate when we're broken, when we're split apart. And the emotional tragedy, how Alice embodies pathos in regards to, because her life, the pain that she endured, and the ultimate betrayal of her spirit being broken by Rufus, who manipulates and abuses her. So indeed, I think your paper is very powerful for that, showing how they're one. They're actually one, in one body split apart. Yeah, I think that's really a really powerful piece. Thank you for that. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think it definitely has potential. I'm excited about all of the presenters' papers being published, but definitely, Esther, definitely make sure that's highlighted and emphasized, because that's going to make a powerful chapter in the journal that's coming out. Yes. All right. Any others? Any other questions, comments for this panel? All right. Well, then we're going to move right along. Next, we have let's see here. Make sure I got it right. Okay, so next we have up the panel, reimagining possibilities in Kindred. And we will hear from Avery. If Avery is with us.
Hi, can I share my screen?
Yes, and Avery will be presenting on "Oh Black Guardian Angel, There Are Shackles Round Your Feet," Octavia Butler's Kindred, as a cosmic metaphor for slavery's persistence in the lives of Black women. Okay, you should be able to share it, Avery.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, so just put this in present mode. Okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Avery Bennikin. I am a freshman journalism, soon to be English major from Kansas City, Missouri. And I am going to be, Dr. Akazi read my title. It's kind of long, but that's because when I was really struggling with writing this paper because, when the source material, you want to do right by it so much that you kind of go over. That's why I'm not reading the entirety of my paper, but I do want to share some of the main points. So can get started. So in my conceptualization of the essay, based on the excerpts we were assigned to read in class, I got really stuck on the specifics of Dana's role when she would time travel back to the Wayland plantation. So see, she has this like intersectional existence, right? As a Black person, as a woman, but now on the Wayland plantation as a part of the social caste of slaves. And so that's going to kind of lead into the first point. Kindred speaks to the perpetual servitude of Black women using their historical role as caretakers to white children as a literary vehicle. And I included excerpts from my essay at the top that kind of help clarify my point. But this point basically goes back to the intersectionality of her role. Rufus's survival is contingent on Dana, and Dana comes to care about young Rufus in this guardian angel and caregiver-like position. And I think Butler's choice to depict Dana's enslavement in this specific way was very intentional. And it speaks to a historical cycle of servitude that Black women have been in since slavery, of rearing up white children who would one day become the oppressor. And I saw this as a method of self-preservation, like literally in Dana's case, keeping Rufus alive for her own longevity, but then also applied to like historical application, Black women having to, give up raising their own children to raise white children, so the survival of their family could happen. And so we see this in slavery, we see this in Reconstruction, we see this in Jim Crow, and we still see this today. The standard or the stereotype that the help for upper white class families are going to be Black and brown women. And so we see that lineage. And so it's a memory of what enslaved us, and it never really goes away. And so that kind of leads into my second point. The generational effects of slavery are not static traumas. Though the means of servitude and enslavement have changed throughout history, we cannot escape the legacy of slavery. And so for this, I really want to talk about the means of servitude. And this connects to the earlier point of, Dana's enslavement is very specific to Black women, and how her survival relied on this sort of enslavement. And I think this spoke to the nature of slavery altogether, because I think sometimes when we think of slavery, it's this big generalized idea, right? But there was specific factions. And so this is a Black woman slavery, an exploitation of every facet of her personhood, of her womanhood, of this maternal instinct she has. And though the means of servitude may look different, though we're not enslaved, they still shift around the same central exploitation. And in my essay, I applied this to the prison system and specifically the enslavement of Black men. And I referenced a famous slave owner, Willie Lynch, the eponym for lynching. He was a British slave owner in the West Indies. And he said, for black male slaves, keep the body, but take the mind. And we see this kind of influence the formation of the chain gang and then form into, the American prison system we see today. And so we really just cannot escape the legacy of slavery. And that leads into my final point. I have to move this slide. Like Dana, Black Americans are forcibly taken to the past through the remnants of slavery in the institutions around us. And so I see this point as an amalgamation of the previous two ideas. Existing in America, a nation built on the enslavement of our ancestors and, the continued servitude post-emancipation elicits a similar emotional jolt that being ripped through the space-time continuum does. It's disjointed. But like Dana, Black Americans continue to persist because of self-preservation, but also of carving out a space in America, in a nation built on our oppression. It's just you have to do that. And so those were the main points of my essay. And then I have some concluding thoughts. And so I think this is really what I was really in awe of the text, in awe of Butler, like all of us are here. But I think this is what makes her so revolutionary.
examining the specifics of slavery, first of all, because I feel like even in a lot of contemporary work, we don't see the specifics of slavery. I think of the 12 Years of Slave movie. There's this big generalization of what slavery is, and how that panders to white audiences. But this felt like a very direct to Black audiences. Like these are specific incidents of slavery. And I think examining that with a science fiction lens, again, is very revolutionary. The molecularization of enslavement, making it so down to the core of who we are as people in this nation, but doing that through science. And I thought that was amazing. And it was very poignant and presents so much for the reader to draw out and and to analyze. And so that's really what I wanted to share with you all. That's all I have. So thank you.
Excellent. Great job, Avery. Thank you so much. Great job. All right. We're going to continue. And again, we will have a Q&A session after this panel. Next, we have up Savannah. We have Savannah Riddick, and Savannah will be presenting. Second here. Okay, there we go. Okay, Savannah Riddick will be presenting Octavia Butler, Critical Response.
I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry.
Savannah.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Can you see this too?
Yes.
Oh, okay. One second. How do I just share like one tab?
So just open up the tab that you want to see first, and then click share, and it's going to show all these tabs, and you click the tab that you want us to see.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Savannah Riddick. I am a freshman psychology major from New Jersey. So today I'm going to be sharing my essay. Beloved author Octavia Butler continues to shape American literature, leaving a profound impact on society through her innovative storytelling and holistic exploration of themes regarding racial justice, identity, and power. From a young age, Butler grew a passion for reading and a fascination with libraries, where she spent most of her time. She not only read copious amounts, but libraries were a safe space for Butler. They provided possibilities and gave her purpose. Her famous novel, Kindred, published in 1979, deliberately explores the journey of the protagonist, Dana, as she travels from the present time to the antebellum South during slavery. A key theme Butler focuses on in the novel is time travel. Dana's journey reflects how trauma from slavery is passed through generations, affecting her identity and mental health. Butler forces people to think critically about the connection between slavery and generational trauma, furthering the importance of understanding history so that it doesn't repeat itself. Time travel is used as a metaphor to connect the past and present United States, emphasizing the importance of acknowledging the past to understand how the country has evolved. In the River excerpt, as Dana describes her time travel to the South, her diction reveals the immense fear she has of the environment. She says, I lowered my head and closed my eyes for a moment. I was shaking with fear, with terror that took all the strength out of me. I folded forward, hugging myself, trying to be still. Dana immediately realizes this is not her time. She hears the southern accents and sees the threatening husband, his hand gripping the gun, and the wife wearing a long dress glaring negatively at her. Dana notices the dynamics between the individuals around her, and each interaction forces her to recognize the brutal realities of slavery and how traumatizing the experience is on her mental health. Scott, Jones, and Kamara describe how the psychological, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse Africans experienced during enslavement in the United States had long-lasting trauma effects. Furthermore, in the fall excerpt, Dana clearly sees the differences between the past and present, causing her to feel unsettling feelings with the language used by white and Black individuals. Specifically, when Rufus questions the interracial marriage of Kevin and Dana, he uses the N-word as a degrading way to denounce his complete disgust with their love. He finds it completely impossible that the two are married, and his speech is deemed normal. However, because Dana can look at both past and present, she understands the differences between the two time periods. She snaps, "I don't like that word, remember? Try calling me Black or Negro or even colored." Time travel is used as a metaphor for Dana, a young Black woman, to recognize how the effects of oppression continue to persist and affect her mentally. It forces her to face the cruel system of slavery and rethink her identity. Kindred also forces people to critically think about the traumatic impact of slavery on African Americans. In the prologue, one of the first things Dana says is how she lost about a year of my life and how much of the comfort and security I had not valued until it was gone. This line reveals how agonizing the experience was of the antebellum South and makes her realize the true atrocities of her journey to the past. Researcher Dr. Joy DeGroyd developed a theory called post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is a condition that exists as a consequence of multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants resulting from centuries of chattel slavery. Kindred exemplifies post-traumatic slave syndrome through Dana. Butler analyzes how issues faced in the present stem from experiences in the past. Racism continues to perpetuate trauma in Black people through generations, and although the United States has progressed since slavery, there is still an ongoing fight to end racism. Lastly, implicit bias connects to the novel by targeting a broader subject of the psychological impacts of social stereotypes that have formed over generations. Connecting to Kindred, racism developed centuries ago, and the different stereotypes have been passed down through history. The novel implicitly asks people to examine how, as humans, we can fix issues for a brighter future. Understanding one's own biases can help them in the future by teaching their children or others around them to acknowledge prejudices they may hold and to learn from them. It is important to become okay with being comfortable discussing uncomfortable topics such as race. Octavia Butler continues to be a legacy and a person who forever changed American literature.
Excellent. Great job, Savannah. Great job. Thank you for the visuals as well. All right. Now we have Moses Rogers and Afrofuturism in Octavia Butler's Kindred. Moses Rogers.
Hi, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Moses Rogers. I'm a freshman sociology major, and my project is on rejecting whiteness and adjectival reading of Octavia Butler's Kindred. Octavia Butler's Kindred stands as a pinnacle in Afrofuturist fiction. It has stood the test of time, being reprinted and readapted several times since its release in 1979. Its connection between past and present, slave and modern freemen, race then, race later, and race now all prove to be almost unfortunately applicable whenever time it is read. The one notion of the book that I cannot co-sign, sort of refuse to co-sign, is Butler's notion that Blacks and whites are kindred. This idea is pushed mainly by the plot point that Rufus is Dana's ancestor, and subtly through Dana and Kevin's interracial marriage. Though both are irrefutable facts in the novel, I do not think they fit Butler's notion of kindredness. So, kindred, when used as a noun, is defined by Merriam-Webster as a group of related individuals. And when used as an adjective, it is defined as alike in nature or character. If anything, Butler's proposal of Black and white kindredness fits the noun definition on technicality, but if we are to observe the adjectival definition, Butler is far from correct. Beginning with Kevin, Dana's progressive, supportive white husband, a character to contrast the overwhelming racist whites the Whalen family represent. I find, though, that he appears to represent the much less favorable white liberal
similar to the liberalism represented in Jan Erlone of Richard Wright's Native Son, a character who, while perhaps well-meaning, overestimates his understanding of racial conflict presently and historically in the United States. Kevin overinserts himself in Dana's gruesome ventures into the antebellum South, an action that could be seen as protective had it not forced him to assume the role of Dana's slave master. I cannot see Kevin's actions as the protective or positive decisions of a husband. Instead, they appear grotesque and even perverse. Similar to how Jan Erlone finds it enough that he does not refer to Bigger Thomas by a slur and drives his car for him, Kevin appears to find it enough that he has rejected the racial prejudices of his family and married a Black woman. And perhaps we are supposed to see this as enough as well. And Dana apparently does. It is just as much her faults that enable Kevin's behavior. I observed myself becoming increasingly frustrated as she stayed with him, first after having witnessed firsthand the way white men treated Black women historically, and second after his reaction to the plantation being much less gruesome than he expected. I would claim that Kevin's actions, freeing slaves and marrying Dana, were not done because his heart led him to, or perhaps not even because he believes in them, but more likely for himself, maybe to rest his conscience or because he wishes to be seen as anti-racist, but not for the sake of Black people and not for the sake of Dana. His speech and observations appear to be performative, if not facetious. They question me, detain me for a while. That's what they call it. Attempting to put aside his privilege and mistakenly equate his experiences with the police as a white man and her experiences as a Black woman. Kevin is not Dana's kindred spirit. His character and nature do not align with Dana's. Throughout the novel, Dana attempts to teach Rufus to treat Black people with as much respect as he would a white person. In Butler's portrayal of kindredness, Rufus exists as kindred to Dana through her heritage. The question becomes, is this enough to create a bond between two people? In a more direct way than we see with Kevin, Rufus, without a doubt, does not meet the requirements to be kindred to Dana. Rufus's relation to Dana relies on need. He first interacts with her when he is drowning in the river. Rufus's views of Blackness do not exist beyond the realm of need. When he looks at Alice, it is not as someone who he loves, cares for, but as something he needs. He looks at Dana not as someone who he cares for or has affection for, but as someone he needs. Nothing in Rufus's life as a white man exists outside of his needs. Where he does not need it, then it is not there. For both Rufus and Kevin, there can be no real likeness in nature or character with Dana. There is now at the time it was written and during the time of slavery, no way for a Black woman and a white man to have this likeness as they exist as social counters to each other. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Ooh, didn't even look at it through that angle, Moses. Powerful. Please unmute for questions, comments. This brings the final panel to a closure. Questions, comments about these powerful last presentations. And if there's anyone that did not present earlier that for unforeseen circumstances could not join us earlier, please unmute and we have a little time for one or two more, but any questions or comments about this one? Questions, comments. I know I have one in particular, and that is, I like how you dismantle and have us rethinking and reassessing Dana's husband in Octavia Butler's Kindred. This is very, very powerful that I didn't think of before. But it was sort of we started dabbling into it, after Dr. Ayawa's powerful keynote presentation, and when we started the discussions, and it started, I think, about the missing Gorham and why she goes back to her husband in the end. So with that being said, and I like how you're questioning Butler. This is the mark of great scholarship, great researcher. Never be intimidated by a work, to interrogate it, to question it, to have us rethinking it as well. Can you share with us? I just want to push the needle a little further. Do you see similarities between Kevin and Rufus? Can we take a deeper dive? Could Kevin and Rufus, and this is real radical, but we were just talking about three women as one. If you were to take the three male characters in Butler, Kindred, what three male characters would that be? Could we argue that they're actually as one body? And if so, could one be representing one segment, maybe ethos, another pathos, another logos? Or what are your thoughts about that, Moses? If one were to argue the three main male characters in Octavia Butler's Kindred being represented as one, what are some similarities? And
Yeah, I would say that probably like the way you see that Rufus is sort of like a, I guess, softer version of his father. I feel like Kevin is just a softer version of that. Like it's still the same instilled racism. It's still the same, views of the world. Just because they think about it differently doesn't mean that it's still not. They're still engaging with the racism and enforcing the racism in not similar ways, but from the same mindset.
Wow, Moses. And would you argue, I mean, one is whenever, okay, we can all agree that they also have something in common as well, and that's privilege, right? White privilege, and they're men, right? We can argue that. So I would say, would you say that they're using their privilege the same or differently in the text? I mean, Dana is the connection. But how would you say, for instance, are they using their privilege and power the same in a text? If so, how? If not, how? And I'm just asking this because it's a powerful piece. It's going to make a powerful chapter in the journal. What are your thoughts on that? Just pushing it a little further.
Yeah, I think Kevin definitely uses his power in different ways, but he still has that power at the end of the day. Like he's still like, regardless of whether he uses it or not, he still has the power as a white man. And regardless of, like nothing he does is because he doesn't want to, I guess. Like he can do whatever he wants because he is a white man and he does have this power, right? So the solution would not be power using your power, but it'll more so be relinquishing this power to give it on to more people so more people have opportunity.
Wow, Moses. Yeah, I agree with you. I can definitely see, the similarities, Kevin and Rufus, in their privilege, and their dependence on Dana as well. The connection with Dana and their struggles with morality. I would also say, and I want your thoughts on this, is Kevin, does he serve as, is he a foil to Rufus, by showing how these individuals with privilege can either challenge or reinforce the oppressive systems? They have the privilege to do that. They could either challenge it or reinforce the oppressive systems. It looks like Butler is doing this, showing this in the text. And I'm thinking together their characters could be underscoring Kindred's exploration of power, and the complexities of the human relationships within the historical and the systemic context, and never thought of putting Kevin, Rufus, and Rufus' father in alignment and arguing, could they also be considered one? Man, that's powerful. If you had to say it, if you were to to say ethos, pathos, and logos, looking at it from a rhetorical perspective, which one would you say represents credibility? Which one represents the pathos, the emotional side, and which one perhaps represents the logic or the reasoning, if that any? Or do you think it's utterly impossible? What are your thoughts about that, Moses, or anyone else?
Sorry, what do you mean by that? If I could just ask.
So, what if we were to argue that Rufus, his father, and Kevin are as one, but split into three, like representing one body, but split? Because we were talking earlier about the previous presentation about Black sisterhood and Dana, Sarah, and Alice being as one body and split, and each one representing one segment of one body, ethos, pathos, and logos, the credibility side, the logical side, the emotional side. It's just something to ponder. It may be going way out there, but something to ponder. You definitely opened up something regarding Rufus, his father, and Kevin. And do they represent one body with white man? And if so, who represents what? And what is Butler trying to say by them being split?
I guess I would say, Kevin is supposed to be the pathos, like he's supposed to invoke some sort of emotional feeling out of you, and sort of Rufus in a way too, because I feel like you're kind of supposed to want them to be able to do good, but at the end of the day, they still don't. And then I think Rufus's father is the ethos, I guess, like he is what he is, like regardless, like there's no other way for him in the novel.
Okay. Very powerful. Thank you. Definitely look into that, Moses. And I think Corey Lamont has Dr. Corey Lamont has a question or comment. Thank you, Dr. Lamont, for joining us.
Yeah, hi. I actually have a question for Avery as well, but I'll direct this first question to Moses since we're talking to him. So Moses, and I really enjoyed your reading. Thank you for that. And thinking through the adjective of kindred and what it actually means, and I like you sort of reading against the grain of the text. But so this is more or less sort of a problematizing of your reading, if you will. So if we think about that part of Butler's critique in the text is her critique of power and how it operates through these different, what we would call matrices of difference, right? If she's thinking that, okay, that there are ways in which whiteness, there are ways in which maleness and femaleness, like there are all of these ways in which power is ascribed to difference. And so some people have access based on how these differences are read, right? So if we think about essentially the notion of kindred, if Butler's critique is that these systems or the way that power operates through these different vectors, be they race or gender, because part of what you were saying is that there's no way that we can see Kevin and Dana being kindred. But isn't part of what Butler suggesting is that at the end of the day, we're all essentially human, and that's what makes us kindred, as opposed to us being kindred solely based on race or gender or those types of things.
I would say yeah, but at the same time, that sort of ignores like power structures that we know are there. So it's kind of hard to ignore that. Like, regardless, we are all human beings, but there is a system that has been put on place that is very realistically affecting our lives that creates this barrier for those two to have that kindredness.
No, absolutely. And I don't think Butler is essentially asking, I'm just asking you to think more about her because I don't think Butler is essentially asking us to ignore those. So I think you're absolutely right that those things do exist, right? And so we can't ignore them. But if we're thinking about the text in sort of its, especially since the framework is Afrofuturistic, right? That part of what Butler is asking us to do is to imagine a different set of possibilities in which race or gender doesn't matter in the same way as it did during the period of enslavement or even as it matters now, right? So that the kindredness isn't just literal, but it's also aspirational, if you will. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I would
Ex-
say though, I think one of the most important parts of that is that the relationship between white man, black woman then is not vastly different than the relationship between white man, black woman now.
Mm,
Mm.
got you. I appreciate you. I just wanted you to think a bit about that in terms of um, the idea that Butler is in fact critiquing the power that you're saying that divides them is the so it's not like you're essentially saying that Butler is ignoring any of those differences because I actually don't think she is, and I don't think I want to suggest that she is. I think part of what she's saying is that in order for us to what makes us kindred is our common humanity, and that these are the obstacles or these are the things that sort of impede us essentially being kindred, but definitely not for us to ignore the actual real effects and implications of the way that race and gender sort of divides.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you so much, both Dr. Lamont, and thank you so much, Moses, for that powerful presentation. The beauty of the university in general, and Howard University, and just universities and all, and the beauty of literature and humanities, within our department is being able to engage in these scholarly conversations from a plethora of different perspectives, and no angle, no question, no perspective or theoretical lens that we want to look out is incorrect as long as we support it, with evidence and rationale and so forth. So, and I agree with Dr. Lamont in regards to kudos, Moses, and all of you for questioning and re-examining. That's what research is all about. And at the end, we want to move forward towards solutions, and reimagining the future and what that will look like collectively. Um, from a humanist point, from as well as humanitarians as well, but very powerful, very powerful. Thank you. Any other questions, comments for this panel? We do have one more presentation that was supposed to go earlier. We'll go ahead and let them go now, and then we're going to get ready to wrap this up. But wow, absolutely powerful.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
No, I did have a quick question for Avery. It was more so about because I appreciated her presentation as well.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
Hi, Avery. So my question was, I don't even know if it's more so a question or as it is a thought, because you were talking, so you began your presentation with this more or less gendered reading of the text, thinking about sort of the historical figure of the Black female and how she served mostly in the sort of child rearing protective role. And then later on in the presentation, you transition to making the link to enslavement and the current prison or the carceral system. But then I don't know if this was deliberate or not, but so there was more so a shift from women to men when you talked about sort of the chain gang and so forth. And I was wondering if that shift was conscious or deliberate, that you wanted to focus on both genders, because my thought as you made that shift and you were talking about prison and it was mostly about men. And so what I wanted to ask was about, did you give thought to about even women in the carceral system? Because sometimes that's a conversation that doesn't get discussed as much. So I was wondering if the shift was deliberate, just to sort of talk about both genders, or was it, or have you given thought to sort of making that connection to women's experiences in prison as well?
Yeah, I think the shift was deliberate in terms of not necessarily the mode, like you have the setting of the prison and then you have the setting of the home, but I was more trying to emphasize the shift in the central exploitative quality. And so when I think of what has historically been exploited of Black men, I think of their bodies, I think of physical labor, I think of even the sexualization of Black men. And I think about that in the same way as Black women, but in the context of slavery, I think about it as like an interjection with the family. Like in my research, I was reading about how Black women who had just given birth were made to breastfeed white children. And so I wanted to more focus on the centralized exploitative thing, not necessarily the mode and the space, but more this quality. And I think prison was just a vehicle. Being in the home was just a vehicle. And yeah, if I expounded more upon that, it would probably divulge from those like places. But yeah.
No, thank you. That clarifies, and thank you for making that, because it's a really important sort of distinction, that it was more so the mode than the actual place or space. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, and thank you so much. We have one more presentation again from earlier today that we'll go ahead and make an exception. So if you're ready now, we will go ahead and turn it over really quickly. Last but certainly not least, Michaela Truitt. So if everyone can give a round of applause for Michaela Truitt, and if you can please share with us the title of your presentation again, please.
Hi, my name is Michaela Truitt, and I'm a freshman undeclared major from Savannah, Georgia. And my essay and my presentation is called Connection to Our Ancestors. So I'm just going to go ahead and read off my essay. Why not a story embracing and praising the hardships of our ancestors rather than judging them? Why not? Other than analyzing the obvious terrors of slavery, African Americans tend to think about how they could have made better decisions that were preventative from the horrors that occurred. If I were her, I would have just. Couldn't they have just? It wouldn't have been that hard to. When we say those things, are we really thinking about what it would have been like to be in their shoes? Do we really understand the extent of pain and suffering our ancestors endured? I think not. It's easy to imagine things differently when you haven't personally experienced them. And Octavia Butler's Kindred brings us on a journey that proves this point. Dana, a contemporary Black woman, is an incredibly knowledgeable character with historical insight, but still had so much more knowledge to gain from her ancestors to survive. Nothing in my education or knowledge of the future had helped me to escape. Yet in a few years, an illiterate runaway named Harriet Tubman would have made 19 trips into this country and led 300 fugitives to freedom. What had I done wrong? States Butler. The realization that education didn't mean smart is daunting and mind-boggling. To be able to navigate, build the mental and physical strength to endure, and live knowing you can be harmed at any moment aren't considerations in our mind when we fixate on what we could have done better. She suddenly gained a newfound appreciation and respect for the slaves of that time. The notion of being non-judgmental towards our ancestor was a point made in Daniel Black's talk as well. He emphasized that being educated about slavery is not to lead us to criticizing their actions, but to learn from them. Dana had to step back in time in order to see how the blood in her very veins was thinking about her before she was ever conceived, states Black. The sacrifices made by our ancestors are bigger than we know, but their hardships brought us to freedom and ownership of ourselves rather than someone else's property. Black also states, "You are the hope and the dream of a slave." Marcus Haynes defines Black speculative fiction as rehistoricizing an experience or era of a particular time in history so that we might imagine a fuller truth of that history. This is exactly, as Black emphasized, what Octavia Butler intended for us to discover as readers. Octavia Butler achieves this sci-fi moment not by leaping into the future as most sci-fi writers do, but by returning to the past, a place where the excellence of Black people might have been missed. Butler completely flipped the script to squash the common diminishing of our ancestors' efforts and raise embraces and praises towards them. On that note, let's take us out with Beyonce with her song "Be Alive," which coincides with the theme of empowering our people's battles. Until next time, thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. Any questions for Michaela? Any questions? I like how you tied in the ancestors. I think that was very, very relevant, very important to do so. Any questions or comments for Michaela? Okay, so for this panel, very powerful panel, I'd like to thank each and every one of the presenters on this panel today. Very thought-provoking presentations, very insightful presentations that have explored the many ways that Octavia Butler's Kindred compels us to reimagine the past, as several of you had emphasized in your presentations. Through the lens of groundbreaking work, we've seen how history is not just something that we observe through your presentations, but something we actively engage with, shaping and being shaped by it. Your presentations have illuminated the profound roles of sisterhood and spirituality and navigating the complexities of the past, reminding us of the power of collective support and the strength that we draw from faith and purpose. Additionally, the themes that were mentioned in some of the outstanding presentations as well, themes of patriotism and the influence of ancestors deeply resonate indeed in Kindred, as Butler challenges us to reflect on how the struggles and sacrifices of those who came before us shape our present identities and responsibilities. Indeed, Sankofa looking back as we move forward. Through their endurance, we see and resistance, our ancestors laid the groundwork for our freedoms, and their stories remind us of the importance of honoring their legacy. So these themes that you all have so eloquently presented on today for this final panel, brought to life through your analysis, highlight the transformative potential of even storytelling to bridge the past and present. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths, which you all unveiled, while empowering us to envision a future grounded in understanding justice and resilience. And so as we bring this panel to a closure, hopefully all of us have some takeaways from this, just as we have from the panels previously as well. And hopefully this will help us to reimagine, rethink, and reanalyze, and to strive to honor our ancestors, foster unity, and embrace justice and equity that we continue to strive for. So thank you all presenters for this final panel. And now we're going to shift gears, and we're right on time to closing remarks. So I want to open it up at this time before we come with final words. I want to open it up and thank all of you. Some of you in the audience that didn't get a chance to speak, please share with us, what were your thoughts about today's inaugural symposium? And of course, I will be sharing an anonymous survey link to see if this is something that we want to continue in the first year writing program in the Department of English at Howard University. This was the inaugural one, but I tell you, you guys knocked it out the box. Wow, so impressed. But what are your thoughts? This is open to anyone, students, faculty, staff, guests, family, loved ones. Feel free to unmute, even for the presenters. What were your thoughts about today? Because your thoughts, your voices matter in regards to today's symposium. Any reflections? Any last minute reflections? Any last minute reflections? And we have some more people coming in as well. Any last minute? Would you all like to see something like this in the future? Yes, no? All right. Well, thank you all again. I would like to share, again, exciting news. Thank you so much. Thank you. All of the presenters today, and I want to call them out because calling out is very powerful. From Esther to Imani to Avery to Savannah to Moses to Sydney and Mariah and Kamari and Kimora and Audrey, and the list goes on. Thank you. You will be published. This needs to go on your resume. You presented at a professional research-driven symposium, and you will be published in a peer-reviewed referee journal. You will all receive free copies of it, and you will receive certificates of appreciation. I will give them to your fellow professors that nominated you for to be considered. We had a lot of submissions, and select ones were chosen, and you were among the chosen ones. So you should be very proud of yourself and make sure you put this on your resume. You did an extraordinary job, and this is what we want. This is what keeps you ahead of the curve. This is what our first year writing program at Howard University and our Department of English is all about. And we want you to know that we support you. We had a plethora of people today here to support you. So in closing remarks, as we come to the close of our inaugural first year writing student research symposium, again, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've accomplished here today. This symposium has been a testament to the creativity, the scholarship, the intellect, and passion of our very own students. This is student-focused, student-driven, who have embraced the opportunity to engage deeply with Octavia Butler's Kindred and its themes of race, identity, historical trauma, sisterhood, spirituality, and beyond. Today, we witness the power of academic inquiry and storytelling to inspire new ways of thinking about the past, present, and future. Through your presentations, scholars, you have reimagined history, highlighted untold narratives, and connected Butler's work to contemporary issues that continue to shape our world today. To our student presenters, you have set the bar high with your thoughtful research, compelling arguments, and courageous voices. You have reminded us all of the critical role that writing, research, scholarship play in reimagining society and envisioning transformative possibilities. To our esteemed faculty, staff, and guests, thank you for your guidance, for your support, for your encouragement in creating a space where our students can thrive academically and creatively. Your presence here reinforces the value of community and collaboration and scholarship. Now, as we conclude, let us carry forward the ideas and conversations sparked here today. May we continue to question, analyze, and imagine boldly, using the lessons from this symposium to inform our work and strengthen our commitment to intellectual growth and social justice. Thank you all for your participation, dedication, and contributions. This has been an incredible day of learning and inspiration, and I look forward personally to seeing how the seeds planted today will grow into new opportunities and achievements. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and weekend, and we thank each and every one of you for making this event such a success. Please be on the lookout for our link for the survey. Your voices matter, and we want to know what we've done right and what we can do to enhance it as we continue to push the needle forward to continue excellence in our program. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and this recording will be on our YouTube channel. Until next time, goodbye.